They called me a fat pig on the happiest day of their lives. My daughter-in-law laughed as her father physically shoved me out of the family photos, telling me not to ruin the aesthetic with my cheap suit. They thought I was just a broke mechanic who smelled like old motor oil and failure. They had no idea I had secretly signed a check for $150,000 just hours before to pay for every single orchid, every steak, and every drop of crystal champagne in that room. They certainly didn't know that by Monday morning I wouldn't just be the man they insulted. I would be their boss. Before I tell you how I brought the Sterling dynasty to its knees, let me know where you are listening from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand tall while people treated you like you were invisible. The Grand Plaza Hotel smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the 300 guests mingling below. I stood in the far corner of the ballroom, clutching a glass of water, trying to make myself as small as possible. I was wearing my only suit. It was charcoal gray, purchased off the rack 10 years ago for a funeral. The fabric was worn at the elbows and the style was outdated, a stark contrast to the custom-tailored tuxedos surrounding me. I felt the eyes of the staff on me, probably wondering if I was a lost janitor who had wandered into the wrong event. From my vantage point, I watched my son Jamal. He looked magnificent in a white dinner jacket, holding court near the head table. He was laughing, his arm draped around his new bride, Vanessa Sterling. Vanessa was stunning, I will give her that. Her dress probably cost more than my house. But every time her eyes swept across the room and landed on me, her smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer annoyance. My hand instinctively went to the inside pocket of my jacket. I could still feel the phantom weight of the checkbook I had put away earlier. $150,000. That was the cost of this fantasy. When Jamal had come to me 3 months ago, pale and shaking, telling me the Sterlings were threatening to call off the wedding because he couldn't afford his share of the venue costs, I did what any father would do. I stepped up. But there was a condition. Jamal had begged me not to tell Vanessa where the money came from. He told her his crypto investments had finally paid off. He wanted to look like a provider. He wanted to look like an equal to the wealthy Sterling family. So I stayed silent. I let my son take the credit for my life savings because I wanted him to walk with his head held high. I watched them now, moving through the crowd like royalty. Vanessa whispered something to Jamal, and he nodded nervously. They began walking toward my corner, trailing the Sterling family behind them like a royal procession. My heart warmed for a second. I thought perhaps Jamal was bringing them over to say thank you, or at least to offer a moment of kindness. I straightened my tie and brushed a speck of invisible dust from my lapel. I wanted to make my son proud. Vanessa reached me first. Up close, her perfume was overpowering, masking the scent of the lilies that filled the room. She didn't hug me. She didn't even offer her hand. She turned to her mother, Clarissa Sterling, a woman who looked like she had never smiled a day in her life. Mom Vanessa said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "This is Cyrus, Jamal's father." Clarissa peered at me through her glasses as if I were a stain on the carpet. "Oh," she said flatly. "The mechanic." I extended my hand. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sterling. It is a beautiful ceremony." She didn't take my hand. She just stared at my rough, calloused fingers, fingers that had turned wrenches for 40 years to put Jamal through college. Vanessa let out a short, sharp laugh. "Don't mind him, Mom. He always smells a bit heavy. You know, like grease and oil. It is hard to wash that lower-class stench off, I suppose." My hand dropped to my side. I looked at Jamal, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say that these hands built his future. But Jamal just looked down at his polished shoes, swirling the ice in his drink. Vanessa wasn't finished. She leaned in closer to her mother, though she spoke loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "Honestly, we just have to tolerate the fat pig for tonight. It is a family obligation. Once the wedding is over, we won't have to deal with him much. He doesn't exactly fit our brand, does he?" The Sterling family erupted into laughter. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a cold, exclusionary sound that made my skin crawl. They were laughing at my weight, my job, my very existence. And my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had just saved from financial ruin, forced a weak smile and chuckled along with them. I felt a heat rise in my chest, but it wasn't shame. It was clarity. For years I had made excuses for them. I told myself they were just stressed, or that cultural differences made them cold. But this was not stress. This was cruelty. Before I could excuse myself, a photographer hustled over. "Exquisite, exquisite," he chirped. "Let us get a family photo while the lighting is perfect. Everyone together, please." The group shuffled into a semicircle. Jamal and Vanessa in the center, Clarissa and her other children on the left. I stepped tentatively toward the right side next to Jamal. I stood up straight, trying to suck in my stomach, trying to look dignified for the picture that would hang on my son's wall for decades. Suddenly, a heavy hand clamped onto my shoulder. It was Preston Sterling, the patriarch of the family. He was a tall man, imposing, smelling of expensive scotch and entitlement. He didn't squeeze affectionately. He gripped me hard like a bouncer removing a drunk. "Excuse me, old friend," Preston boomed, his voice projecting across the silent ballroom. I looked at him confused. Yes. He smiled, but his eyes were dead. "We need to clear the frame. You are blocking the view of the floral arrangement. Why don't you step aside for this one?" He didn't wait for me to move. He physically shoved me. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a push strong enough to make me stumble backward. I nearly tripped over a waiter carrying a tray of appetizers. Preston laughed, smoothing his tuxedo jacket. "Don't look so hurt, Cyrus. We just want the photo to look pristine. You understand aesthetics, don't you? Or is that not something they teach in the garage?" I regained my balance and looked at the group. They had already closed the gap where I had been standing. The wall of expensive suits and silk dresses was impenetrable. I looked at Jamal one last time. Our eyes met. For a second I saw panic in his face. He knew this was wrong. He knew who had paid for the flowers Preston was so worried about. He knew who had paid for the tuxedo he was wearing. But he didn't say a word. He turned his face toward the camera and smiled, the perfect practice smile of a man who had sold his soul to belong. "Okay, say cheese," the photographer shouted. Flashbulbs popped, blinding me for a moment. They cheered and clapped for themselves, a perfect family unit that had successfully surgically removed the unwanted tumor. Me. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't flip the table or demand my money back. That is what a weak man would do. That is what a man with no options would do. I simply nodded, mostly to myself. I adjusted my cuffs and turned my back on them. I walked slowly across the ballroom, the sound of their laughter fading into a dull buzz behind me. I made my way to the far bar, which was empty. The bartender looked at me with pity. "Can I get you something, sir?" I looked at the selection of top-shelf liquor. "Give me a sparkling water with a twist of lemon," I said calmly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an old model with a cracked screen, another detail Vanessa often mocked. But it worked perfectly fine for what I needed to do. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't called in months. It was labeled simply Arthur. Arthur answered on the first ring. It was a Saturday night, but Arthur was paid very well to be available on Saturday nights. "Cyrus Arthur," said, his voice sharp and professional. "I didn't expect to hear from you tonight. I thought you were at the wedding." "I am," I said, taking a sip of the water. "It is a lovely event, very illuminating." There was a pause. Arthur had worked for me for 20 years. He knew my tone. "What do you need, Cyrus?" I turned on my bar stool so I could look back at the wedding party. Preston Sterling was currently holding court, a cigar in one hand, gesturing wildly as he bragged to a group of investors. I knew Preston's company, Sterling Tech, had been struggling for liquidity for months. He was putting on a show of wealth to attract a buyer, hoping to cash out before the ship sank. "Arthur," I said quietly into the phone, "where are we on the Sterling Tech acquisition file?" "It is ready to go," Arthur replied. "We completed the due diligence last week. We were just waiting for your signal. You said you wanted to wait until after the wedding to avoid any awkwardness for Jamal." I watched Preston shove another guest playfully, laughing at his own joke. I watched Vanessa pointing at my empty table in the corner and rolling her eyes. "The awkwardness has passed," I said. "Push the button, Arthur." "Are you sure, Cyrus? This is a hostile takeover. Once we execute the buy orders on the outstanding debt and trigger the clauses, there is no going back. It will be aggressive." "I want it aggressive," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I want you to buy everything. The debt, the outstanding shares, the mortgage on their headquarters. Leverage the shell companies so they don't see it coming until the ink is dry." "Consider it done," Arthur said. "We can have the paperwork finalized by tomorrow evening." "No," I said. "Work through the night. Pay the overtime. I want to be the majority shareholder and chairman of the board by the time the market opens on Monday morning." "Understood," Arthur said. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said, watching Preston Sterling toast to his own greatness. "Draft a memo for the first board meeting. The first order of business will be a restructuring of the executive leadership. I think the current CEO needs to retire immediately." I hung up the phone and placed it gently on the bar. The bartender was looking at me curiously. "Rough night?" he asked. I looked at the wedding party one last time. The flashbulbs were popping again. They looked so happy, so secure, so arrogant. "No," I said, smiling for the first time that night. "It is actually turning out to be a very productive night." I finished my water, left a $20 bill on the counter, and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't say goodbye to my son. I didn't say goodbye to the new family that found me so disgusting. I walked out into the cool night air, took a deep breath, and got into my old truck. As I drove away from the hotel, I didn't smell like grease or motor oil. I smelled like justice. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle. It was a view that cost $2 million. I should know because I wrote the check for it 3 years ago. I bought this place as a graduation gift for Jamal, putting the deed in his name so he would always have a roof over his head that no one could take away. I wanted him to have the security I never had growing up. Standing in the hallway with a velvet box in my hand, I realized that giving your child everything might actually be the fastest way to lose them. I had arrived at 9 in the morning. I knew it was early for newlyweds, but I wasn't just stopping by for coffee. I had come to deliver the most precious object I owned. In my pocket next to the velvet box was a thick envelope containing $20,000 in cash. It was meant to be spending money for their honeymoon in the Maldives. I wanted them to swim with sharks and eat gold leaf steak without checking their bank account. I wanted to be the father who made magic happen. I used the spare key Jamal had given me years ago. I didn't want to ring the doorbell and wake them if they were sleeping. I quietly pushed the door open and stepped into the foyer. The apartment smelled of stale champagne and expensive perfume, the lingering scent of the reception from the night before. I heard rustling in the living room. I walked softly across the marble floors, my heart swelling with the anticipation of seeing my son start his new life. But when I turned the corner, I didn't see Jamal. I saw Vanessa. She was wearing a silk robe that dragged across the floor, standing over a large black trash bag in the center of the room. She was moving with a frantic energy, pulling framed photographs off the mantel and the bookshelves. I watched confused as she looked at a picture of Jamal and me from his college graduation. She sneered, dropped it into the bag, and heard the glass crack. Then she reached for the silver frame that always sat in the center of the room. It was the only photo Jamal had of his mother, Martha. It was taken 3 days before she died of cancer. In the photo, she was frail, but her smile was radiant, her hand resting on a young Jamal's shoulder. That photo was sacred. It was the heart of this home. Vanessa didn't hesitate. She didn't look at it with respect or sorrow. She tossed it into the garbage bag like it was a wrapper from a fast food burger. "Out with the old," she muttered to herself, dusting off her hands. "We need to clear this clutter if we are going to get featured in Architectural Digest." I felt a cold hand squeeze my heart. That wasn't clutter. That was my wife. That was the woman who worked double shifts at a diner so we could buy Jamal his first computer. Vanessa was erasing us. She wasn't just redecorating, she was methodically removing every trace of where Jamal came from. I cleared my throat. The sound was loud in the quiet apartment. Vanessa jumped and spun around. Her eyes went wide and then immediately narrowed into slits of annoyance. She didn't look guilty. She looked furious that she had been interrupted. "Jesus, Cyrus," she snapped, pulling her robe tighter. "Do you know how to knock? It is 9 in the morning. We just got married yesterday. Can't we have a single moment of peace without you hovering over us?" I walked past her and reached into the trash bag. I ignored the sharp edges of broken glass cutting into my fingertips as I pulled out the photo of Martha. I brushed a coffee stain off the silver frame and set it back on the mantel. "I gave Jamal this apartment," I said, my voice low and steady. "And I gave him this photo. It stays." Vanessa rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "This is my house now, Cyrus. And frankly, that depressed aesthetic doesn't match the vibe I am going for. But whatever. Keep your little shrine if it makes you feel better. Just don't expect me to dust it." The bedroom door opened, and Jamal stumbled out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He was wearing silk pajamas I had never seen before. He looked at me then at Vanessa, and I saw his shoulders slump. He looked exhausted, not like a man in love, but like a man who was already walking on eggshells. "Dad," Jamal said, his voice thick with sleep. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I looked at my son. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to point at the trash bag filled with our memories and ask him why he was letting this woman erase his history. But I saw the fear in his eyes. He was terrified of upsetting her. "I came to give you your wedding gift," I said. I pulled the velvet box from my pocket. This wasn't something I had bought. This was something I had protected. I opened the lid. Inside lay a heavy gold necklace with a deep red ruby pendant. It was antique, crafted in the 1920s. It had belonged to my grandmother, then my mother, and finally Martha. Martha had worn it on our wedding day. She had made me promise to give it to Jamal's wife one day. I held it out to them. "This has been in our family for 4 generations," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Your mother wore it when we said our vows. It represents the strength and endurance of our family. I want you to have it, Vanessa." Vanessa stepped forward. She didn't look at my face. She looked only at the gold. She snatched the box from my hand, her nails grazing my palm. She held it up to the light, squinting. She let out a scoff that sounded like a bark. "Is this it?" she asked, looking at Jamal. Jamal looked down at the floor. "Ness, it is an heirloom. It is important to Dad." Vanessa laughed. "It is old gold, Jamal. Look at this setting. It is clunky. It is outdated. And honestly, it smells a little like a basement. Who is going to wear this? I certainly am not." She tossed the box onto the coffee table. It landed with a dull thud. "Maybe we can melt it down," she said, casually examining her fingernails. "Or sell it. Gold prices are up right now. We could probably get a few thousand for it. That would cover the cost of the champagne upgrade you botched." My blood ran cold. Sell it. This wasn't metal to be traded. This was my history. "Jamal," I said, looking at my son, "are you going to let her speak about your mother's necklace like that?" Jamal looked at Vanessa, then at me. He looked like a trapped animal. "Dad," he mumbled, "styles change. You know how Vanessa is. She likes modern things. Maybe we can keep it in a safe deposit box." He was a coward. My son, the man I raised to be a warrior, had been reduced to a servant in his own home. Vanessa sighed loudly. "Look, are we done with the sentimental garbage? I have a headache and I need my latte. By the way, Cyrus, since you are here, we need to talk about the wedding bills." I frowned. "I paid the bills. Every single one. I wrote a check for $150,000. Vanessa shook her head. That covered the basics. But there were overages. Significant overages. The floral arrangements had to be flown in from Holland last minute because the local ones looked wilted. And we had to upgrade the wine list because my father refuses to drink domestic. It came out to another $50,000. Jamal said you would handle it. $50,000. I looked at Jamal. He was sweating now. He wouldn't meet my eyes. 50,000, I repeated. For flowers and wine. "Yes," Vanessa said, tapping her foot. "And we need it wired today. The vendors are being annoying." I looked around the room, my eyes scanning the mess she had made. And then I saw it. Sitting on the dining room table, surrounded by tissue paper, was a bright orange box. I knew that box. I knew that logo. Hermes. And sitting next to the box was a brand new Birkin bag, black leather gold hardware. I knew enough about luxury goods to know that bag didn't cost $500. It cost anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000. And next to the bag was a receipt. I walked over to the table. Vanessa moved to stop me, but I was faster. I picked up the receipt. It wasn't for flowers. It wasn't for wine. It was a receipt for the bag dated 2 days ago. $48,000. I looked at the receipt, then at the bag, then at Vanessa. "You spent $50,000 on a purse," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "And you are trying to bill it to me as wedding expenses." Vanessa didn't flinch. She crossed her arms and lifted her chin. "I needed it for the honeymoon. I have to look the part, Cyrus. You wouldn't understand. You drive a truck. Appearance is currency in my world. And since Jamal told me you have some secret crypto millions stashed away, I figured 50 grand wouldn't hurt you." I looked at Jamal. He knew. He stood there wringing his hands, knowing his wife was lying to my face, knowing she was embezzling money from me to buy leather goods while claiming it was for his wedding, and he said nothing. He was letting her rob me. The silence in the room was heavy. I could feel the envelope in my jacket pocket. $20,000. It felt heavy like a brick. I had come here to give them the world. I had come here to bless their union. But looking at the discarded photos of my wife, the rejected necklace on the table, and the $48,000 lie sitting in an orange box, I realized I wasn't blessing a union. I was funding a parasite. I slowly folded the receipt and placed it back on the table next to the bag. "I see," I said. So are you going to write the check or not? Vanessa demanded. We have a flight to catch. I reached into my pocket. Vanessa's eyes lit up. She thought I was reaching for my checkbook. She thought she had won again. I pulled my hand out empty. No, I said. Vanessa's face dropped. Excuse me. I said no. I am not paying for your bag, and I am not paying for your lies. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the velvet box. I wiped a smudge of Vanessa's fingerprint off the lid. I put the necklace back in my pocket right next to the $20,000 that they would never see. Dad Jamal stepped forward, panic rising in his voice. Dad, please. She is just stressed. Don't do this. We need that money. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the fear, but I also saw the entitlement. He thought I was a bottomless well. He thought my love meant I would let him bleed me dry. I already paid for the wedding, Jamal, I said. I paid for the roof over your head. I paid for your education. I am done paying for your mistakes. I turned to Vanessa. You want to be a Sterling. You want to live that high society life. Then go ask your father for the money. Oh, wait, you can't, because he is broke. That is why you married my son, isn't it? You thought he was the golden goose. Vanessa's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. Get out, she shrieked. Get out of my house. It is Jamal's house, I said calmly. For now. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. I heard Jamal calling after me, begging, but I kept walking. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, blocking out the sound of Vanessa screaming at Jamal, I touched the envelope in my pocket. They wanted a war. They wanted to treat me like a fool and a bank account. I pulled out my phone and dialed Arthur again. Good morning, Arthur, I said. Cyrus, Arthur answered. It is Sunday. I know, I said. I have another job for you. I need you to look into the deed for the penthouse. I want to know the eviction laws in Seattle. And Arthur, cancel the honeymoon suite I booked for them in the Maldives. Cancel it, Arthur asked. Yes, I said, watching the numbers on the elevator panel count down, and transfer the refund to the acquisition fund for Sterling Tech. I have a feeling I'm going to need every penny for what comes next. I walked out of the building and into the bright morning light. The air smelled fresh. My heart was breaking for my son, but my head was clear. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man who had just closed the bank, and the foreclosure was coming next. I sat in the leather chair of my private office, the one located behind the unmarked steel door at the back of my auto repair shop. To the world, I was Cyrus, the grease-stained mechanic who fixed radiators and changed oil. But in this room, surrounded by monitors displaying market trends and acquisition reports, I was the silent owner of a diversified portfolio worth millions. My son Jamal didn't know this room existed. He only knew the front counter where I wiped my hands on a rag and handed customers their keys. It was a test I had designed years ago to see if he could build his own character without the crutch of my wealth. A test he was currently failing in spectacular fashion. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was Jamal. I let it ring twice, taking a sip of black coffee before answering. I knew exactly why he was calling. The silence from the penthouse had lasted exactly 24 hours, just long enough for Vanessa to realize the money tap had been turned off. Hey, Dad. Jamal's voice came through the speaker, thin and trembling. He sounded like he was 12 years old again, asking if I was mad about a broken window. Hello, Jamal, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I assume you are calling to apologize for yesterday. There was a long pause. I could hear hushed, aggressive whispering in the background. It was Vanessa. She was coaching him. She was pulling his strings like a marionette. Yeah, look, Dad, about yesterday, Jamal stammered. Vanessa was just really stressed. The wedding planning took a lot out of her. She didn't mean to be disrespectful. She just has high standards. You know how it is. I leaned back in my chair. No, Jamal, I don't know how it is. I don't know what it is like to insult the man who paid for your life because he won't pay for a handbag. But, go on. Right. Well, Jamal continued, ignoring my comment. The thing is, we are in a bit of a bind. We had our hearts set on the Maldives for the honeymoon. Vanessa found this incredible overwater bungalow. It is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, Dad, but the travel agent needs the payment today, or we lose the reservation. And how much is this once-in-a-lifetime experience, I asked, though I already had a feeling. $30,000, Jamal whispered. $30,000, I repeated. For a vacation. Jamal, I just spent $150,000 on a party that lasted 6 hours. I tried to give you $20,000 cash yesterday and your wife basically threw me out. Now you want $30,000 more. It is not a gift, Dad, Jamal said quickly, his voice pitching up in panic. It is a loan. A bridge loan. Just until my crypto investments bounce back. The market is just down right now. You know how volatile it is. I closed my eyes. There were no crypto investments. I knew that because I monitored his financial footprint. Jamal was broke. He was living on the salary from the entry-level marketing job. I helped him get a salary that couldn't possibly support Vanessa's appetite for Hermes and five-star resorts. I am sorry, son, I said, injecting a note of weary resignation into my voice. I can't do it. The wedding tapped me out. I emptied my retirement savings for that reception. I don't have $30,000 lying around. I am just a mechanic, remember? The whispering on the other end stopped. Then there was a scuffling sound like the phone was being snatched away. "Listen to me, you useless old man," Vanessa's voice shrieked into my ear. It was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my head. "Stop lying, Cyrus. Jamal told me you have money stashed away in that dirty little shop of yours. You are just being spiteful because I didn't want your ugly old necklace. You are punishing us because you are jealous. You are jealous that your son married up and you are stuck changing tires for the rest of your pathetic life." I stared at the stock ticker running across my computer screen. It showed that my latest acquisition was up 4%. "Vanessa," I said calmly, "I am not punishing anyone. I am simply telling you the well is dry. If you want to go to the Maldives, get a job. You stingy, miserable parasite," she spat. "You are holding out on us. Fine. If you don't want to support this family, then you are not part of this family. Do you hear me? You don't get to see Jamal. You don't get to come to the penthouse. And if we ever have children, you will never ever hold them. You will die alone in that garage smelling like gasoline, and we won't even show up to the funeral." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the office pressing in on me. She had played her final card. She had threatened to cut me off from my own bloodline. She thought that would break me. She thought I would call back begging checkbook in hand, desperate to buy my way back into their lives. She was wrong. She hadn't broken me. She had freed me. I turned to my computer and opened a secure browser. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I needed to see the damage. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. When Jamal went to college, I opened a joint checking account with him. It was meant for emergencies, books, and tuition. Over the years, I had kept my name on it mostly out of habit, but I never checked it. I assumed Jamal was using it responsibly for his bills. I logged into the banking portal. The screen refreshed and my stomach dropped. The balance was $42. I clicked on the transaction history. It was a massacre. For the last 6 months, the account had been hemorrhaging money. But it wasn't being spent on rent or groceries. It wasn't even being spent on Vanessa's luxury bags. The transfers were specific. $5,000, $3,000, $10,000. And the recipient for every single transfer was the same name, Clarissa Sterling. I stared at the name. Vanessa's mother. The woman who looked down her nose at me at the wedding. The woman who called me a mechanic with the same tone she would use for a cockroach. I opened a second window and ran a search on Clarissa Sterling. It didn't take long. My private investigation software pulled up her financial records within minutes. Clarissa wasn't just broke. She was drowning. She had liens on her house, maxed out credit cards, and a massive outstanding debt to 3 different online casinos. The picture became clear. Vanessa wasn't just a spoiled brat. She was a conduit. She was draining Jamal dry, stealing his salary, stealing the money I gave him, and funneling it all to her mother to feed a gambling addiction. I looked at the dates. The day I gave Jamal the down payment for the penthouse, a transfer of $50,000 went to Clarissa the very next morning. They stole my house money. They stole my son's future, and they used it to play blackjack. My hands were shaking not from age, but from a cold, hard fury. I had let this happen. I had enabled it by trying to protect Jamal from the harshness of the world. I had cushioned him so much that he had become soft prey for predators like the Sterlings. I picked up the phone again. This time, I didn't call Jamal. I dialed the number for Arthur, my lawyer, and the only man who knew the full extent of my empire. "Arthur," I said when he answered. "We are moving to phase 2, Cyrus," Arthur said, his voice cautious. "We haven't even finished the paperwork on the hostile takeover of Sterling Tech. That is proceeding as planned," I said. "But I need you to open a new file. This one is personal. I need you to pull the deed for the penthouse in Seattle." "The one Jamal lives in?" Arthur asked. The one I paid for, I corrected him. I need you to check the clauses in the trust agreement. I seem to remember a stipulation about the property being used solely for the benefit of the beneficiary. Yes, Arthur said slowly. It is a standard clause. Why? Because the beneficiary is being defrauded, I said. I have evidence that the funds I provided for the maintenance and equity of that home have been embezzled. I want you to initiate a forensic audit of Jamal's finances. And Arthur, I want you to prepare an eviction notice. Eviction? Arthur sounded stunned. For your son. No, I said, for the squatters who are abusing my son. But since he won't leave them, he's going to have to get caught in the crossfire. I want you to freeze the assets. I want you to lock the accounts. I want you to contact the credit bureaus and flag every single card linked to my social security number or my address. You are going to nuke his credit score. Cyrus, Arthur warned. He won't be able to rent a car, let alone buy a house. He doesn't need to buy a house, I said, staring at the transfer logs on my screen. He needs to learn that you can't finance a lifestyle on lies. If Vanessa wants to call me stingy, I am going to show her what stingy really looks like. I want you to cut the power to the penthouse. Cut the power, Arthur repeated. You heard me. I pay the utilities on that place. It is in my name. Cancel the account. Today. I want them sitting in the dark tonight. I want Vanessa to try and plug in her hairdryer and realize that the electricity, just like my patience, has officially run out. Understood, Arthur said. I will make the calls and the Sterling Tech deal. Accelerate it, I said. I want to own her father's company before they get back from this imaginary honeymoon. I want to own the desk Preston Sterling sits at. I want to own the chair he sleeps in. I hung up the phone. I looked around my office. It was quiet, it was efficient, it was powerful. For too long I had played the role of the humble provider. I had let them walk all over me because I thought that was what love looked like. I stood up and walked to the wall safe hidden behind a painting of the first car I ever restored. I spun the dial and opened the heavy steel door. Inside were stacks of cash bonds and the original deed to my auto shop. I reached in and pulled out a single thick envelope. It contained the evidence I had gathered on Preston Sterling over the years. The corner cutting the safety violations, the offshore accounts. I had saved it as insurance in case he ever tried to hurt my business. I threw the envelope onto my desk. I wasn't just going to hurt his business, I was going to dismantle his life. Vanessa wanted a war with the mechanic. She wanted to mock the man with the dirty hands. She didn't realize that mechanics are the ones who know exactly how to take a machine apart bolt by bolt until it is nothing but a pile of scrap metal. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I had a busy afternoon ahead of me. I needed to go to the bank. I needed to go to the utility company. And then I was going to drive past the penthouse. I wanted to be there when the lights went out. I wanted to be watching from the street below when Vanessa Sterling realized that the darkness wasn't just night falling. It was the shadow of the fat pig she had laughed at coming to collect his debt. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Blackwood Holdings Tower took exactly 30 seconds. In that half-minute I shed the skin of Cyrus the mechanic. I left behind the grease under my fingernails, the slight stoop in my shoulders, and the humble silence I had worn like a cloak for 2 decades. When the doors slid open, I stepped onto the plush carpet not as a blue-collar father trying to please ungrateful children, but as the majority shareholder of a private equity firm that ate companies like Sterling Tech for breakfast. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who had been with me for 5 years, stood up immediately. She didn't look at me with the pity the bartender had shown me at the wedding. She looked at me with absolute reverence. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said, using the name I conducted business under. "Your suite is ready. The tailor delivered the charcoal brioni 10 minutes ago." I nodded, walking past the rows of analysts and junior executives. They were heads down, working furiously. They didn't know I was the man signing their paychecks, but they knew the energy in the room shifted when I walked by. I entered my private suite, a space of chrome and glass overlooking the city of Seattle. I stripped off my worn flannel shirt and the stained work pants. I washed my face in the marble basin, scrubbing away the last remnants of the man who had been shoved out of a family photo. When I put on the suit, I felt the transformation complete. The Italian wool settled onto my shoulders like armor. I adjusted the silk tie in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the fat pig Vanessa had laughed at. He was a predator. He was a titan. And he was very, very angry. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Send in Marcus. Marcus, my chief financial officer, entered moments later. He was holding a thick tablet and looked like a man who had discovered a bomb. He sat down without pleasantries. "Cyrus, we have a problem with the Sterling Tech acquisition," Marcus said, sliding the tablet across the mahogany desk. "Or rather, we have an opportunity depending on how ruthless you want to be." "I am feeling extremely ruthless today, Marcus," I said, picking up the tablet. "What did you find?" "We cracked their internal ledger this morning," Marcus explained. "On the surface, Sterling Tech looks like it is struggling with cash flow due to market conditions. That is the story Preston Sterling has been telling investors. But when we dug into the expense accounts and the offshore shell companies, we found the truth. The company isn't failing because of the market. It is failing because Preston is looting it." I swiped through the documents. The numbers were staggering. Corporate jets used for personal vacations to Ibiza. Company funds used to pay off gambling debts in Macau. Construction contracts awarded to phantom companies that Preston owned. "He is embezzling," I said, my voice flat. "He is stealing from his own shareholders to pay for his tuxedos and his daughter's handbags." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And he is sloppy. He thinks no one is looking closely because he is a Sterling. He thinks his last name is a shield. If we release this information to the SEC, he goes to prison for 20 years. I smiled. It was a cold, humorless smile. "No," I said. "Prison is too easy. If he goes to prison, he becomes a victim. He becomes a martyr. I want him to suffer. I want him to watch his empire crumble while he is still sitting on the throne." Just then, the private line on my desk blinked red. It was a line reserved for high-priority external calls. Sarah's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Blackwood, I have a Preston Sterling on line 1. He is demanding to speak to the new chairman. He says it is urgent." I looked at Marcus. The timing was poetic. Preston didn't know who bought his debt. He didn't know the mechanic he pushed aside was now the man holding the leash. "Put him on speaker," I said. "But keep me on mute." There was a click, and then Preston's booming, arrogant voice filled the room. "Hello? Hello. Is this the chairman's office? This is Preston Sterling. I need to speak to the principal investor immediately. We have some transition details to discuss, and frankly, I need to vet whoever thinks they can buy my company." I leaned forward, staring at the speaker. I could hear the tremor in his voice. He was blustering, trying to sound dominant, but I could smell the fear through the fiber optic cables. He knew the walls were closing in. He was trying to charm the new owner before the audit started. I signaled to Sarah to speak. "I am sorry, Mr. Sterling." Sarah's cool, professional voice replied. "The chairman is currently in a high-level strategy meeting. He is not taking calls from subsidiary management at this time." "Subsidiary management?" Preston spluttered. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO. I built this company. You tell your boss that he needs me. I am the face of Sterling Tech. The chairman is aware of your position." Sarah said, her tone icy. "He has reviewed your file. He has instructed me to tell you that your schedule has been cleared for a performance review." "A performance review?" Preston shouted. "I don't get reviewed. I do the reviewing. When can I meet him? I will fly to New York. I will fly to London. Name the place." "The chairman will be in Seattle next week," Sarah said. "He will summon you when he is ready. Until then, you are instructed to freeze all discretionary spending and remain in your office. Do not leave the building, Mr. Sterling." "But I have a gala tonight," Preston whined. "The chairman suggests you skip it," Sarah said. "Goodbye, Mr. Sterling." She cut the line. I looked at Marcus. He was grinning. "He is going to sweat for a week," Marcus said. "He is going to be terrified." "Good," I said. "Let him sit in that corner office and wonder which axe is going to fall. Let him wonder if the new owner knows about the embezzlement. Fear is a powerful solvent, Marcus. It dissolves arrogance very quickly." I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Seattle lay spread out below me, gray and rainy. Somewhere in that city, in a penthouse I paid for my son, was likely realizing that the power had been cut. I checked my watch. It was noon. The eviction notice should be arriving within the hour. My personal cell phone vibrated in my pocket. It wasn't the business line. It was the number only family had. I pulled it out. The screen flashed the name Vanessa. I debated ignoring it. I had important work to do. I had a company to dismantle and a legacy to secure. But a part of me, the part that was still angry about the insults, wanted to hear her panic. I slid my thumb across the screen and held the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. Cyrus Vanessa's voice was shrill, piercing the quiet elegance of my office. Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you have done? Hello, Vanessa, I said calmly. I assume the electricity is off. The electricity, the internet, the water, she screamed. I am in the middle of getting ready for a brunch and the shower stopped working. I have shampoo in my hair, Cyrus, and Jamal's credit card just got declined at the grocery store. He is standing there with a cart full of food like a hobo. That sounds inconvenient, I said, examining the cuff of my jacket. Perhaps you should use some of the cash you sent to your mother to pay the bill. There was a stunned silence. How do you know about that? She hissed. I know everything, Vanessa, I said. I know about the gambling debts. I know about the $50,000. I know about the lies. Did you really think you could steal from me and I wouldn't notice? You have no right to spy on us, she yelled, recovering her offensive stance. That money was a gift. Once you gave it to Jamal, it was ours to do what we wanted with. And my mother needed help. You are so selfish. You sit on your pile of money while family suffers. You are not my family, I said coldly. You made that very clear at the wedding. Fine, she spat. You want to play hardball. Let us play. You think cutting off the money is going to make us come crawling back? You are wrong. You are just ensuring that you die alone. I am not alone, I said. I have my dignity. Dignity, she laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. You are a lonely old man. And guess what, Cyrus? Jamal and I have been talking. We were planning on starting a family this year. We were going to give you a grandchild, a little boy to carry on your precious last name. I felt a pang in my chest. A grandson. It was the one thing I wanted more than anything. But now she continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Now you will never see him. Even if I get pregnant tonight, you will never know. You will never see the ultrasound. You will never hold him. You will never hear him call you Grandpa. I will raise him to hate you. I will tell him his grandfather was a miser who abandoned his family. I will erase you from history, Cyrus, just like I threw out that picture of your dead wife. The threat hung in the air. It was monstrous. She was using an unborn hypothetical child as a hostage. She was weaponizing my own bloodline against me. A year ago, that threat would have brought me to my knees. I would have apologized. I would have written the check just for the hope of a future connection. But standing in my tower wearing my armor, I felt something different. I felt clarity. A child raised by Vanessa Sterling in that environment of greed and toxicity wouldn't be my grandson. He would just be another victim or another monster. Vanessa. I said, my voice steady and devoid of the pain she wanted to hear. You can't withhold something that doesn't exist. And frankly, looking at the way you treat people, I think the world is better off without your lineage continuing. What did you say to me? She shrieked. I said, I don't care, I replied. I am done being held hostage by your hypothetical future. I am focusing on my present, and my present involves taking back what is mine. You can't take the apartment, she yelled. It is in Jamal's name. Read the fine print of the trust, Vanessa, I said. The trustee has the power to revoke the asset in cases of gross mismanagement or fraud. Embezzling $50,000 counts as fraud. The eviction notice is on its way. You have 48 hours to vacate. You can't do this, she was sobbing now, tears of rage. My friends will see. My mother will see. We will be homeless. You can go live with your mother, I suggested. I am sure she has room in her house. Oh wait, the bank is foreclosing on that too, isn't it? I hate you, she screamed. The feeling is mutual, I said. Goodbye, Vanessa. Enjoy the dark. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the desk. I took a deep breath. My chest hurt, but the air in the room felt cleaner. I had cut the cord. I had faced the ultimate threat, and I hadn't blinked. I turned back to Marcus, who was watching me with a mixture of shock and respect. Is everything all right, sir? He asked. Everything is fine, Marcus, I said, buttoning my jacket. In fact, everything is going exactly according to plan. I walked to the door of my office. Where are you going? Cyrus, Marcus asked. I am going to buy a new car, I said. My truck is getting a little old. And then I am going to drive to the country club. I believe Preston Sterling is having lunch there today. I think it is time the mechanic introduced himself to the CEO. I walked out of the suite, my head high. The war for my dignity was over. The war for the empire was just beginning, and I was ready to conquer. The leather steering wheel of my old truck usually felt like freedom, but today it felt like a shackle. I was driving my son and his wife to the Emerald Hills Country Club, a place where the membership fee cost more than most people earned in a year. Vanessa sat in the back seat applying another layer of lipstick while Jamal sat in the passenger seat nervously adjusting the collar of his polo shirt. They didn't know that I had already initiated the eviction process. They didn't know that the bank accounts were freezing as we spoke. They thought I was just their submissive driver, the beaten-down father, who had come crawling back to do a favor because they needed a designated driver for a day of drinking and networking. Vanessa had called me that morning, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, pretending our fight hadn't happened. She said it was a peace offering. She said Preston wanted to include me. I knew it was a lie. They needed a caddy, a mule to carry their bags and fetch their drinks because the club staff were too busy. I agreed to go not because I wanted to make peace, but because I wanted to see Preston Sterling one last time before I destroyed him. I wanted to see the look in his eyes when he felt safe so I could savor the moment when that safety was ripped away. We pulled up to the clubhouse, a sprawling mansion of white stone and ivy. Valets rushed to open the doors for Jamal and Vanessa, treating them like royalty. When they looked at my truck, they hesitated. I waved them off. I parked it myself around the back near the service entrance. It was fitting. Today, I was the help. I walked to the first tee where Preston was holding court with 3 other men in pastel shirts. They were laughing loudly, the sound of men who had never been told no. Preston saw me approaching and didn't even offer a handshake. He just pointed to a massive leather golf bag leaning against a bench. "Grab that," Cyrus Preston barked, not even looking me in the eye. "And try not to drag it. That leather is Italian." I hoisted the bag onto my shoulder. It was heavy, filled with custom clubs that probably cost $5,000. I stood silently behind him as he took a practice swing, slicing the air with a sharp whoosh. Vanessa walked up, a glass of champagne already in her hand. She looked at me struggling with the bag and smirked. "Try to keep up, Cyrus. Daddy is playing for high stakes today. Don't embarrass us by being slow." We moved onto the fairway. The grass was manicured to perfection, a vibrant, unnatural green. The sun beat down on my neck. I wasn't wearing a hat. I wasn't wearing golf shoes. I was wearing my work boots and a plain t-shirt. I looked ridiculous, a stain on their perfect landscape, and they loved it. As we walked to the 3rd hole, Preston started bragging to his friends. He lit a cigar, puffing smoke into the air that drifted back into my face. "Gentlemen, big things are happening," Preston boomed. "Sterling Tech is about to enter a new era. I have a meeting lined up next week with the new chairman of Blackwood Holdings." One of his friends, a short man with a red face, looked impressed. "Blackwood. I heard they are aggressive. I heard the new owner is a ghost. No one knows who he is." Preston laughed, tapping ash onto the grass. "He is just a money man. I will charm him. I will dazzle him with the projections. Once I get him on board, the stock is going to triple. I am going to be the king of Seattle." I walked a few paces behind them, my face impassive. He was going to charm me. He thought he could manipulate the man whose back he was currently breaking with his golf bag. The irony was so rich I could taste it. Preston turned to Jamal, who was walking beside him like an eager puppy. "And when that deal goes through, Jamal, I am going to take care of you," Preston said magnanimously. "I know you are struggling with that marketing gig. Once I secure the Blackwood funding, I will create a position for you." Jamal's eyes lit up. "Really, Preston? That would be amazing." "Yeah," Preston chuckled. "We need a new head of security for the parking lot. You are a big guy. You can wear a uniform. It pays better than whatever you are doing now. And hey, maybe your dad can come change the oil in the executive limos. Keep it in the family." The group erupted in laughter. Jamal's smile faltered, but he didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just forced a weak chuckle, desperate to stay in their good graces. I tightened my grip on the golf bag. A head of security. An oil changer. That was all they saw us as. Servants, laborers, inferior beings exist to polish their shoes and guard their cars. We reached the 9th hole. It was near the clubhouse patio where a crowd of wealthy patrons sat watching the golfers. Vanessa was already there on her 3rd glass of wine, laughing loudly with a group of women. She waved us over, demanding a refill. "Cyrus, get me a vodka tonic," she yelled from the patio. "And make it strong. I am bored." I set the heavy bag down. My shoulder was aching. I reached into the side pocket of the bag to retrieve a new ball for Preston as he had demanded. My fingers fumbled with the zipper. It was stuck. I tugged at it, trying to be quick. Suddenly, the bag tipped. It fell over with a loud clatter, clubs spilling out onto the pristine grass. A dozen white golf balls rolled in every direction. The conversation on the patio stopped. Everyone looked. Preston turned around, his face purple with rage. "You clumsy idiot," he shouted. "Those clubs are custom. If you scratch them, you are buying me a new set." I knelt down scrambling to pick up the balls. I was tired. I was humiliated. I was a 60-year-old man crawling on the grass while millionaires watched. Vanessa stormed onto the green. She didn't help me. She loomed over me, blocking the sun. "Look at you," she hissed, her voice slurring slightly. "You can't even carry a bag. You are useless. You are embarrassing me in front of my friends." I reached for a ball near her foot. She kicked it away. Then before I could react, she slapped my hand. It wasn't a playful tap. It was a hard, stinging slap, the kind you would give to a misbehaving dog. "Don't touch me with your dirty hands," she shrieked. "Get up. Go wait in the truck. You are ruining the aesthetic." The sound of the slap echoed across the green. I froze. I looked at my hand. There was a red mark forming where she had hit me. I looked up at her. She wasn't sorry. She was disgusted. I looked at Jamal. He was staring at his shoes, refusing to meet my gaze. He was letting his wife hit his father in public. I looked at Preston. He was checking his clubs for scratches, not caring that I had just been assaulted. Slowly, painfully, I stood up. I brushed the grass off my knees. The humiliation washed over me, but underneath it, something else crystallized. The final tether had snapped. The last shred of mercy I held for my son and his new family evaporated in the heat of the afternoon sun. I didn't yell. I didn't strike back. I simply smiled. It was a cold smile devoid of warmth, the smile of a man who knows the end of the story. "I am sorry about that, Vanessa," I said softly. "I will get out of your sight." I turned and walked away. I left the bag on the ground. I left the balls scattered in the grass. I walked past the staring crowd on the patio. I walked past the valets. As I reached the parking lot, I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I opened my secure messaging app and found the thread with Marcus, my CFO. "Execute Order 66, I typed. Marcus replied instantly. "Sir, freeze the bridge loan for Sterling Tech," I wrote. "Call the bank. Tell them Blackwood Holdings has found irregularities in the collateral. Pull the funding immediately, and Marcus call the towing company. Have them pick up a white Mercedes from the Emerald Hills Country Club. The payments are overdue." I hit send. I got into my truck and started the engine. I checked my rear-view mirror. I could see the golf course in the distance. Preston was teeing up, confident, arrogant, unaware that he was swinging at a ball while standing on a trap door. I didn't wait for them. I drove out of the gate and onto the main road. I left them there with no ride, no money, and a storm coming that they couldn't even imagine. The slap on my hand still stung, but the notification on my phone screen soothed the pain. Loan funding revoked. Transaction confirmed. The game was over. I wasn't the caddy anymore. I was the owner of the course, and I had just canceled their membership. The notification on my private server blinked green at exactly 2 in the afternoon. It was a transaction alert from the Lumiere Spa and Wellness Center, the most exclusive beauty retreat in downtown Seattle. The amount attempted was $1,200 for a diamond dust facial and a deep tissue massage. The status of the transaction was declined. I leaned back in my office chair, steepling my fingers. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine the scene with perfect clarity. Vanessa would be wrapped in a plush white robe, sipping cucumber water, extending her platinum card with that haughty flick of her wrist she had perfected. The receptionist, a young girl likely terrified of her, would slide the card into the machine. Then came the silence. Then came the second attempt. Then came the polite, hushed whisper that the card was not working. My phone buzzed. It wasn't Vanessa calling me this time. It was an intercept from the surveillance software I had installed on Jamal's phone years ago for his own protection, a feature I had forgotten about until this war began. I put on my headset and listened. Jamal Vanessa was screaming, her voice distorted by the echo of the spa lobby. "Why is my card not working? I am standing at the counter with cream on my face, and they are telling me insufficient funds. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" The receptionist is looking at me like I am a pauper. I heard Jamal on the other end. He sounded breathless, like he was running. "Ness, I don't know. My card got declined at the gas station 10 minutes ago. I had to pay with the loose change in the cup holder just to get enough gas to get home. I think Dad really did it. I think he froze everything." "Fix it," Vanessa shrieked. "Call the bank. Call your father. I don't care what you have to do. Beg him. Threaten him. I am not leaving this spa until this bill is paid. If I have to walk out of here without paying, I will burn this city to the ground." I cut the feed. Let her scream. Let her realize that her tantrums had no currency in the real world. I texted Marcus, my CFO. Ensure the freeze is total, no leaks. If they try to buy a stick of gum, I want it declined. Marcus replied instantly. Done. And sir, we have news on Preston Sterling. I walked out to the main floor where Marcus had set up a war room. Screens lined the walls displaying the plummeting stock price of Sterling Tech. It was a beautiful sight. The red arrows pointing down were like arrows piercing the heart of Preston's arrogance. He just got the call from the bank, Marcus said, pointing to a live feed of the Sterling Tech parking lot. The bridge loan you canceled was his lifeline. Without it, payroll bounces on Friday. The creditors have panicked. They are initiating asset seizure protocols. I watched the screen. Preston Sterling stumbled out of the glass doors of his headquarters. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He was holding his phone to his ear, gesturing wildly. Who is he calling? I asked. Everyone, Marcus said. He called 3 venture capital firms. All declined. He called his old fraternity brothers. Declined. Now he is calling hard money lenders. The kind of lenders who charge 50% interest and break kneecaps if you are late. He is desperate, Cyrus. He is trying to plug $1 million hole with payday loans. Let him run, I said coldly. Let him feel the walls closing in. He shoved me at a wedding. Now the world is shoving him. I went back to my office intending to review the acquisition papers for his company. I wanted to be ready to buy the scraps when he finally collapsed. But my personal phone buzzed again. It was an alert from an online marketplace app. I picked it up confused. I hadn't set any alerts. Then I saw the listing. For sale. Vintage, 1978 Ford F-150. Custom restoration. Needs to go fast. Cash only. No title. My heart stopped. I knew that truck. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was the first car I ever restored from the ground up. It was the truck I drove Martha to the hospital in when she was in labor with Jamal. It was the truck we sat on the tailgate of watching fireworks on the 4th of July. It was painted a specific shade of midnight blue, Martha's favorite color. I had put the title in Jamal's name when he turned 16 to lower the insurance premiums. It was a formality. He never drove it because he said it was too loud and smelled like gas. It had been sitting in the garage of the penthouse covered in a tarp, my one condition for buying him the apartment. Vanessa was selling my wife's truck. I clicked on the seller profile. It was a generic name, Seattle Guy 22, but the phone number listed was Jamal's. They were desperate for cash. The credit cards were dead. The bank accounts were frozen. So they were selling the only thing of value they had left access to. They were selling my history to pay for Vanessa's spa bill. I felt a rage so pure it almost blinded me. It wasn't the money. It was the violation. That truck still had the dent in the dashboard where Martha had kicked it while laughing at one of my bad jokes. It still smelled faintly of her vanilla air freshener. I stared at the asking price. $10,000. It was an insult. The parts alone were worth $20,000. But they wanted quick cash. I couldn't call them. If they knew it was me, Vanessa would burn the truck just to spite me. She would drive it into the ocean before she let me have it back. I needed a proxy. I grabbed the burner phone I kept in my desk for sensitive negotiations. I dialed the number on the listing. It rang once. Hello? Jamal's voice answered. He sounded frantic. Yeah, I am calling about the truck, I said, pitching my voice lower, adopting a rougher accent. I saw the ad. You got the keys? Yeah, I have the keys, Jamal said. But listen, man, I need cash. Like right now. Can you come today? I can come in an hour, I said. But I see you don't have the title listed. That is a risk for me. Look, it is my truck, Jamal said, his voice cracking. It is registered to me. I can't find the paper right now. But I will sign a bill of sale. Just bring the cash. I paused. I needed to make sure they didn't sell it to anyone else while I was en route. I will tell you what I said. I really want that truck. I will give you $20,000. Cash. Today. But you have to take the ad down right now. $20,000. Jamal gasped. He couldn't believe his luck. Hold on. I heard muffled voices. He was talking to Vanessa. He says he will pay. 20, Jamal whispered. Take it. Vanessa's voice hissed in the background. It was loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Take it, you idiot. Sell that piece of junk. It is just a rusty old heap that smells like his dead mother. Get the money so I can get my car out of impound. Sell that piece of junk. Smells like his dead mother. I pressed the record button on the phone. Say that again, I said into the receiver. I couldn't hear you. My signal is bad. I said we have a deal, Jamal said loudly. 20,000. Come to the service entrance of the Meridian Tower. Ask for Jamal. I hung up. I saved the recording. I had them. I had the audio of Vanessa desecrating Martha's memory. I had the proof that Jamal was willing to sell his mother's legacy for quick cash. I called Arthur. Arthur, I need you to do something strange, I said. I am listening, Arthur replied. I need you to put on a pair of coveralls, I said. Go to the bank and withdraw $20,000 in $100 bills. Then take the tow truck from the shop. Drive to the Meridian Tower. Buy the blue Ford F-150 from my son. Do not let him know it is for me. Use a fake name. You want me to buy your own truck back? Arthur asked. Yes, I said. And Arthur, when you hand them the money, make sure you get a video of the transaction. I want proof that they took the cash. Consider it done, Cyrus. I sat back in my chair and watched the clock. An hour passed, then 2. My phone buzzed with a video file from Arthur. I played it. The video was shaky, taken from a button camera on Arthur's chest. Jamal was standing in the alley behind the penthouse building. He looked sweaty and pale. Vanessa was pacing behind him, smoking a cigarette, looking furious. Arthur handed Jamal a thick envelope. Jamal counted the bills with trembling hands. It is all there, Arthur's voice said. Fine, Vanessa snapped, stepping forward. Give him the keys, Jamal. Let us go. I have a headache and this alley smells like garbage, just like this truck. She kicked the tire of the Ford. My Martha's Ford. Good riddance to the old man's scrap heap, she spat. I hope you crash it. Arthur took the keys without a word. He climbed into the truck and started the engine. The familiar rumble of the V8 filled the speakers. I watched as Jamal shoved the money into his pocket and turned away, following Vanessa back into the building. He didn't look back at the truck. He didn't say goodbye to the vehicle he had grown up in. He just walked away, selling his soul for $20,000. I closed the video. They had their cash. They thought they had won a small victory. They thought they had solved their immediate problem. But they didn't know that the money they just accepted was the evidence that would bury them. They had sold an asset that technically belonged to a trust I controlled, even if Jamal's name was on the registration. I had set it up that way to protect him from liability. By selling it without my permission, and by selling it for cash to evade the asset freeze I had initiated that morning, they had just committed a felony. I forwarded the video to the district attorney's office, attaching it to the file Arthur had already opened for the fraud investigation. Then I texted Marcus. The truck is safe. Release the next wave. What is the next wave? Marcus asked. I want you to call the landlord of the commercial space where Preston Sterling keeps his private wine collection, I wrote. Buy the building, and then evict him. Tonight. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting over Seattle. The city lights were flickering on. But in the penthouse suite of the Meridian Tower, I knew the lights were staying off. Vanessa had her $20,000. It would last her maybe a week with her spending habits, and when it was gone, she would look around and realize she had sold the only thing that could have carried her to safety. I wasn't done. The truck was safe, but the insults still burned. She had kicked the tire. She had insulted Martha. I walked out of my office and down to the garage. Arthur was just pulling in with the blue Ford. It looked dusty, neglected. I ran my hand over the hood. It was cold metal, but it felt like a heartbeat. I am sorry, old girl, I whispered to the truck. I won't let them hurt you again. I climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled like oil and old leather. It smelled like home. I started the engine. It roared to life, a deep, angry sound. It was time to pay a visit to the Sterling family home, not to fix their cars, but to repossess their dignity. They had taken my cash. Now I was going to take their peace. The silence between us had lasted for 3 days. My accounts were locked, the eviction notice had been served, and the blue Ford truck was safely parked in my garage. I was sitting in my office reviewing the final acquisition documents for Sterling Tech when my personal cell phone rang. It was Jamal. I hesitated. I was tired of the begging, tired of the excuses. But a father's instinct is a difficult thing to kill. I answered. Dad Jamal's voice cracked through the speaker. He wasn't crying in despair this time. He was sobbing with joy. Dad, you have to stop everything. You have to stop the lawyers. Everything has changed. I leaned back in my chair, removing my reading glasses. What has changed, Jamal? Did you find a job? Did you decide to leave her? No. Dad, listen, he gasped for air. Vanessa is pregnant. We just took the test. You are going to be a grandfather. The world stopped spinning for a second. A grandfather. It was the one title I wanted more than CEO or chairman. I closed my eyes, imagining a little boy running through the shop, grease on his hands, laughing. For a moment, just a fleeting heartbeat, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that this was the miracle that would heal our fractured family. But then I remembered who the mother was. Is she? I asked, my voice devoid of the warmth Jamal was expecting. Are you sure? Yes, Jamal cried. She has been feeling sick for days. We took 3 tests. They are all positive. Dad, this is a sign. We can't be homeless. You can't evict your own grandchild. You have to help us. Please. Before I could answer, there was a shuffling sound and Vanessa came on the line. Her voice wasn't shrill or angry like the last time. It was soft, breathy, a performance of vulnerable motherhood. Cyrus, she whispered. I know we have had our differences. I know I said terrible things. It was the hormones. I didn't know I was pregnant, but looking back, the mood swings make so much sense. I am so scared, Cyrus. I want this baby to be healthy. I want him to know you. I stared at the wall. Hormones didn't make you embezzle $50,000. Hormones didn't make you call me a fat pig. I am listening, Vanessa, I said cautiously. We need stability, she continued, her voice gaining strength. The penthouse is, well, the energy there is bad now. With the eviction notice and the power cut, it feels unsafe. I can't be stressed, Cyrus. The doctor said stress could cause a miscarriage. We need a fresh start, a real home. What are you proposing? I asked, knowing the trap was coming. We found a house, she said quickly, in the gated community near my parents. It is perfect. It has a nursery. It has a yard. But we don't have the credit for it, obviously. We need cash. And we need a lot of it. How much? I asked. $2 million, she said. But Cyrus, listen, you don't need that old house you are living in, the one attached to the shop. It is full of fumes. It is dangerous for a baby to visit. If you sell your property, you could buy this house for us. We could all live there, in the in-law suite. You could be with the baby every day. You could help me raise him. I gripped the phone tight. She wanted me to sell my home. She wanted me to sell the shop, the source of my power, the place Martha and I built. She wanted me to liquidate my sanctuary, to buy her a mansion using an unborn child as the leverage. She was holding my legacy hostage before it was even born. That is a big request, Vanessa, I said slowly. Selling my home. It is for the baby, she pressed. Don't you want your grandson to be safe? Or do you care more about your greasy tools than your own flesh and blood? I took a deep breath. I needed to play this perfectly. If she was lying, I needed proof. If she was telling the truth, I needed to protect that child from her. I am happy about the news I lied. A grandchild is a blessing, but $2 million is not something I can move overnight. I need to verify things first. Verify what? She snapped, her soft tone slipping. The health of the baby, I said. I want to see the ultrasound. I want to go to the doctor with you. I want to hear the heartbeat myself. If I am going to sell my life's work, I want to see what I am investing in. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. You can't come to the doctor, she said, her voice sharp. My OB/GYN is very exclusive. They don't allow extra guests. And honestly, Cyrus, having you there would stress me out. My blood pressure is already high. Do you want me to lose the baby? I will stay in the waiting room, I countered. I just want to pay the bill. I want to make sure you have the best care. No, she shouted. I mean, no, it is not a good time. I will send you the picture. I have the ultrasound picture right here. I will text it to you. That should be enough proof for you. If you really love Jamal, you would just trust us. She hung up. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A photo appeared. It was a grainy black and white image of a uterus with a tiny bean-shaped smudge in the center. At the top, it said Baby Sterling Blackwood. I looked at the image. It pulled at my heartstrings. I wanted it to be real. I wanted to print it out and frame it, but I wasn't a fool. I opened the image on my computer. I zoomed in on the patient name. The font looked slightly different than the hospital header. It was sharper, cleaner, as if it had been typed over. I ran the image through a reverse search engine. It took 3 seconds. The exact same image appeared on a website called prankyourparents.com. Fake ultrasound generator. Price $9.99. I felt a coldness spread through my veins that was absolute zero. There was no baby. There was no grandson. It was a JPEG downloaded from the internet. She had fabricated a life to steal my home. She had manipulated Jamal's deepest desire to be a father just to get access to my checkbook. I didn't call Jamal. If I told him now, he wouldn't believe me. He was too desperate for the happy ending. He would think I was being cruel. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch her in the act of living her lie. I called Arthur. I need a tale, I said. On Vanessa, 24/7. I want to know what she eats, where she goes, and who she talks to. And Arthur, I want photos. That night I sat in my office staring at the fake ultrasound on my screen. I didn't sleep. I waited. At 11 o'clock my secure email chimed. It was a file from the private investigator Arthur had hired. Subject location. I opened the file. It was a live stream link. I clicked it. The video feed was dark and grainy, taken from a hidden camera in a dimly lit room. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. It was a bar. The music was loud, a thumping bass that shook the speakers. And there she was, Vanessa. She wasn't resting. She wasn't avoiding stress. She was sitting in a booth at the Velvet Rope, a high-end nightclub downtown. She was wearing a tight red dress that showed no sign of a baby bump. Not that there would be one yet, but the visual was striking. Sitting across from her was a man. He wasn't Jamal. He was older, slicked-back hair, wearing a suit that cost too much. I recognized him. It was her ex-boyfriend, a failed real estate developer named Julian, who had been sued for fraud 3 times. I watched, mesmerized by her audacity. A waitress came to the table. Vanessa didn't order water. She didn't order tea. She ordered a round of tequila shots. I watched as my daughter-in-law, the woman who claimed to be carrying my grandson, threw her head back and downed the shot. Then she licked the salt off her hand and laughed. She leaned across the table and grabbed Julian's hand. So here is the plan. I heard her voice clearly over the ambient noise of the club. The PI must have been sitting at the next table with a parabolic mic. The old man is buying it. He thinks I am knocked up. He is going to sell his shop. 2 million Julian. Once the money hits the account, we take it and run. I leave Jamal, I leave his pathetic father, and we go to Rio. Julian laughed, a greasy, unpleasant sound. You are a genius, Ness. And Jamal. He really thinks he is a daddy. That idiot, Vanessa sneered, signaling for another round. He is picking out cribs right now. He is crying over paint colors. It is pathetic. He will sign whatever papers I put in front of him. We just need to keep the charade up for another week until the wire transfer clears. Then I have a miscarriage due to stress caused by his father and we vanish. I froze the video. I looked at her face, distorted in a laugh of pure malice. She wasn't just stealing. She was planning to destroy Jamal emotionally. She was going to let him believe he lost a child just to cover her tracks. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It wasn't for me, it was for Jamal. I had raised him to be kind, to be trusting, and I had led him straight into the arms of a viper. I saved the video, I saved the audio, I backed it up to 3 different servers. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. This wasn't a lesson, this was an execution. I stood up. I needed to go to the penthouse. I needed to see Jamal, but not to yell, not to fight. I needed to save him. I walked out to my truck. The night air was cold. I drove through the city, the video of Vanessa taking shots playing on a loop in my mind. When I arrived at the Meridian Tower, the doorman tried to stop me. I didn't even slow down. I walked into the elevator and keyed in the override code I had kept as the owner. I walked down the hallway to the penthouse. The door was unlocked. The lights were off because I had cut the power, but there were candles everywhere. Jamal was sitting on the floor in the living room. He was surrounded by paint swatches. Blue, yellow, green. He was holding a teddy bear. He looked up when I entered. He smiled, his face illuminated by the candlelight. "Dad," he whispered. "Look, I think yellow is good. It is neutral. For the baby." I looked at my son. He was so happy. He was so innocent. I walked over and knelt beside him. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Jamal," I said softly. "Did you sell the house?" he asked, his eyes wide. "Did you get the money for the new place?" I pulled out my phone. I didn't want to do it. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But I had to cut the cancer out before it killed him. "I didn't sell the house, son," I said. "But I brought you something else." I held the phone up. I pressed play. Jamal watched. He watched Vanessa drink the tequila. He watched her hold Julian's hand. He heard her call him an idiot. He heard her plan to fake the miscarriage. I watched the light go out of his eyes. I watched his heart break in real time. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just turned to stone. He dropped the teddy bear. It fell onto the floor looking small and abandoned in the flickering light. "She isn't pregnant," he whispered. "No," I said. "And she is leaving me." "Yes," I said. Jamal stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark city. He stood there for a long time. When he turned back to me, he looked different. He looked older. The boy was gone. "What do we do, Dad?" he asked. His voice was cold. "We finish it," I said. "She wants to go to Rio. I say we help her pack, but not the way she thinks." I stood up and put my arm around him. "Come home, son," I said. "Back to the shop. We have work to do." He nodded. He walked out of the penthouse without taking a single thing. He left the paint swatches. He left the teddy bear. He left the life he thought he had. We walked out together. The war was entering its final phase. Vanessa thought she was playing a game. She didn't know the game board had just been set on fire. The glow of the computer monitor was the only light in my office behind the auto shop. It was 3 a.m, the hour when the city slept and the rats came out to feed. I was wide awake staring at a file my private investigator had labeled simply "Hotel Surveillance." My finger hovered over the mouse. Part of me, the part that was just a father who wanted his son to be happy, wanted to delete the file without opening it. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a shred of decency left in the woman my son had married. But the other part of me, the man who had built an empire from scrap metal and sweat, knew that hope was a dangerous luxury I could no longer afford. I clicked the file. The video player opened. The footage was high definition, taken from a hidden camera inside a suite at the Four Seasons. My investigator was expensive, but he was thorough. The room was lavish, filled with flowers that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Vanessa walked into the frame. She wasn't wearing maternity clothes. She was wearing a silk robe holding a glass of champagne. Behind her walked Julian, her ex-boyfriend, the failed real estate developer I had seen her with at the bar. He wrapped his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. I watched my stomach churning with a mixture of nausea and cold fury. They toasted. They laughed. And then they started talking. "I can't believe he bought the pregnancy story," Julian said, collapsing onto the bed. "Jamal really is the dumbest guy I have ever met." Vanessa took a sip of her drink, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "He isn't just dumb, Julian. He is pathetic. He literally cried when I showed him the fake ultrasound. He started talking about painting the nursery yellow. I almost burst out laughing in his face. It was so hard to keep a straight face while he was blubbering about being a dad." "And the old man?" Julian asked. "What about the mechanic?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Cyrus is the problem. He is stubborn, but he is old. Did you see him at the wedding? He looks like he is one burger away from a heart attack. He is knocking on death's door anyway. I am just helping him speed up the inheritance process." She walked over to the window, looking out at the city lights. "Once I get the $2 million for the house," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone barely picked up, "I am going to drain every account Jamal has access to. I will max out the credit cards. I will sell whatever furniture is left. I am going to leave that family with nothing but dust. And then I will file for divorce. I will claim emotional distress. I will say the miscarriage broke me. I will play the victim so hard, the judge will probably give me alimony for life." Julian laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You are wicked, Ness." "I am a survivor," she corrected him, "and I deserve better than a grease monkey's son." I paused the video. I couldn't watch anymore. I sat in the darkness, the silence of the shop amplifying the pounding of my heart. She wasn't just greedy, she was a predator. She was actively planning to destroy my son, not just financially, but emotionally. She wanted to leave him broken, believing he had lost a child, while she laughed all the way to the bank. I looked at the phone on my desk. I could call Jamal right now. I could send him this video. I could end it all in 5 minutes. But I didn't reach for the phone. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. If I showed Jamal this video now, it would kill him. He was fragile. I had seen him on the floor of the penthouse clutching that teddy bear surrounded by paint swatches. He was holding on to the idea of the baby like a lifeline. If I shattered that illusion with a cold digital video file, he might not survive the shock. He might deny it. He might say it was a deep fake. He might say I manipulated the footage because I hated her. He was too weak to accept the truth from me. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He needed to be in the room. He needed to smell the betrayal. He needed to feel the heat of their lies on his skin. I had to let the trap play out. I had to let him walk further into the fire so that when the truth finally burned him, the scar would be a reminder never to trust a viper again. It was a cruel decision for a father to make, but I wasn't raising a boy anymore. I was trying to save a man. I saved the video to my encrypted server. I would use it later. For now, I had to be patient. The next morning, the sound of a high-performance engine cut through the quiet hum of my shop. I was under the hood of a 1968 Mustang, my hands covered in oil, when a shadow fell across the concrete floor. I slid out from under the car on my creeper and stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. Standing in the entrance of my bay was Preston Sterling. He looked out of place among the tires and tools. He was wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost $5,000, though it looked a little looser on him than it had at the wedding. The stress of his failing company was starting to eat away at him. He looked around the shop with a sneer of absolute disgust, wrinkling his nose at the smell of oil and gasoline. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice low and rough. I didn't offer him a chair. I didn't offer him water. Preston stepped forward, careful not to let his polished loafers touch a patch of grease. "We need to talk, Cyrus," he said, his voice booming with forced authority. "And frankly, I don't want to be in this hovel any longer than necessary, so listen closely." I crossed my arms, leaning against the Mustang. "I am listening." "Vanessa called me," Preston said. "She is distraught. She tells me you are refusing to release the funds for her new house. She tells me you are demanding ridiculous medical verifications for her pregnancy." I looked him in the eye. "I am just being careful, Preston. $2 million is a lot of money for a mechanic." "Don't play games with me," Preston snapped. "I know you have the money. Jamal said you have savings. You have equity in this dump. You need to sell it. You need to liquidate your assets and give my daughter the security she deserves. She is carrying your grandchild, for God's sake. Have you no shame?" "I have plenty of shame," I said calmly. "Shame that I let my son marry into your family." Preston's face turned purple. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of scotch and desperation. "Listen to me, you old fool," he hissed. "You are going to sell this shop. You are going to give Vanessa that money, because if you don't, I'm going to destroy your son." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? And how are you going to do that?" "I have connections," Preston bragged, puffing out his chest. "I know people in this town. Powerful people. I know the CEO of the marketing firm where Jamal works. We play golf together." I fought back a smile. Jamal worked for Apex Marketing. Apex Marketing was a subsidiary of Blackwood Holdings. I owned Apex Marketing. I signed the CEO's paycheck. "If you don't wire that money by the end of the week," Preston continued, unaware that he was threatening the man who held his mortgage, "I will make one phone call. I will have Jamal fired. I will have him blacklisted. He will never work in this city again. He will be destitute, and it will be your fault." He paused, waiting for me to crumble. He expected me to beg. He expected the poor mechanic to be terrified of the big, powerful CEO. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at the fraying threads on his expensive cuffs. He was a paper tiger. He was a man standing on a trapdoor, threatening the guy with his hand on the lever. "Is that right?" I said softly. "You are going to have him fired." "Watch me," Preston spat. "I will ruin him. And then I will come for you. I will have the health department shut this place down. I will have the zoning board rezone your property. I will bury you in paperwork until you starve." I walked over to my workbench and picked up a heavy wrench. I didn't raise it, I just held it, feeling the weight of the steel. "You are a very confident man, Preston," I said. "I am a Sterling," he declared. "We always get what we want." I nodded slowly. "Tell you what, you go ahead and make your call. You call your friend at the marketing firm. You try to get Jamal fired." Preston blinked, confused by my lack of fear. "You think I won't?" "I think you should focus on your own house, Preston," I said. "I hear the foundation is cracking." "What is that supposed to mean?" he demanded. "It means get out of my shop," I said, my voice hardening into steel, "before I decide to charge you for the air you are breathing." Preston glared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He wanted to scream. He wanted to hit me. But something in my eyes stopped him. He saw something that wasn't a mechanic. He saw a threat. He spun on his heel and stormed out, almost tripping over an air hose. "I will ruin you," he screamed over his shoulder as he got into his car. "You will regret this." I watched him drive away, his tires screeching on the pavement. I put the wrench down. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the CEO of Apex Marketing, a good man named David who I had hired 5 years ago. "Mr. Blackwood." David answered on the first ring. To what do I owe the pleasure? David, I said, you might get a call from Preston Sterling today. He is going to ask you to fire Jamal. There was a pause. He wants me to fire your son. Does he know who you are? No, I said. He doesn't. What do you want me to do? Sir David asked. I want you to take the call, I said. I want you to let him rant. I want you to let him threaten you. And then I want you to record it. And then David asked. And then I want you to offer Jamal a promotion, I said. Give him a raise. Tell him his work is exemplary. I want Preston to realize that his influence is dead. I want him to realize that in this town the mechanic calls the shots. Understood, Sir David said. Consider it done. I hung up. I looked around my shop. It was dirty. It was loud. It was real. Preston Sterling thought he could threaten my son's livelihood. He didn't know that my son's safety net was woven from steel cables that I had spent a lifetime twisting together. I went back to the Mustang. I had work to do. Preston was going to be busy making phone calls. Vanessa was busy planning her getaway. And I was busy preparing the stage for the final act. They wanted a tragedy. I was going to give them a revelation. The rain in Seattle fell in sheets, washing the grime off the city streets, but doing nothing to cleanse the rot that had infested my family. It was 7 p.m. on the night of the Blackwood Holdings Gala. This was the night the financial world had been waiting for. The night the mysterious chairman of Blackwood would finally step out of the shadows and reveal himself as the new owner of Sterling Tech. For Preston Sterling, this was Judgment Day. He had been summoned. He had been told that his attendance was mandatory if he wanted to save even a shred of his company. He was terrified. He was desperate. And desperation makes people do ugly things. I was in the kitchen of my small home attached to the auto shop, finishing a cup of tea. I wasn't dressed yet. I was wearing my work coveralls, the ones stained with 30 years of hard labor. I was waiting for the right moment to transform. But before I could head to my private office to change, the front door rattled. It didn't open. It shook violently. Then I heard the distinct metallic click of a heavy-duty padlock snapping shut on the outside hasp. I frowned and walked to the door. Through the reinforced glass, I saw Vanessa. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the porch light, holding a large umbrella. Her face was twisted in a sneer of triumph. She held a key up to the glass, dangling it tauntingly. "Stay inside, Cyrus," she shouted over the sound of the rain. "We can't risk you wandering out tonight. This is the most important night of my father's life. We are meeting the new chairman. We are going to be billionaires again, and I am not going to let a greasy mechanic ruin the aesthetic." I stared at her. She had installed a hasp on my door while I was drinking tea. She was locking me in my own home like a disobedient dog. "You can't keep me here, Vanessa," I said, my voice muffled by the glass. "This is kidnapping. Call it what you want," she laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "I call it damage control. I told Jamal you were sick. I told him you were contagious and didn't want visitors. So don't bother calling him. He is already at the venue rubbing elbows with the elite. You just sit tight, old man. Watch some TV. Try not to die before we get back. We need you alive to sign those house papers." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement. She got into a rented limousine, leaving me trapped in the dark shop. She thought she had won. She thought a $5 padlock from the hardware store could hold the man who built an empire from scrap. I watched her tail lights fade into the rainy night. I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold professional amusement. It was insulting, really. She had forgotten who I was. She saw an old man. She forgot she was dealing with a master mechanic. I walked to my tool chest. It took me 4 seconds to select the right tool, a pair of 24-inch bolt cutters. I walked back to the door. I didn't even need to step outside. I reached through the mail slot, positioned the jaws of the cutter around the shank of the padlock, and squeezed. There was a sharp snap, loud as a gunshot. The lock fell to the concrete with a heavy clatter. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. I kicked the broken lock aside. It was a flimsy piece of metal, just like her plan. I went back inside and walked to the rear of the shop to the steel door that required a retinal scan and a voice print. I entered my sanctuary, my private suite. Hanging in the center of the room, illuminated by a spotlight, was my armor, a bespoke tuxedo hand-stitched in Savile Row, midnight blue with a black satin lapel. Beside it, a pair of cufflinks made from the piston rings of a classic Ferrari I had restored, a subtle nod to my roots that only I would understand. I showered, scrubbing away the smell of the shop. I shaved with a straight razor, watching my own eyes in the mirror. They were hard. They were ready. When I put on the tuxedo, Cyrus the mechanic vanished. In his place stood Chairman Blackwood. I strapped on a platinum watch that cost more than the house Vanessa wanted me to buy. I adjusted my tie. I was ready. I walked out the back exit of the shop into the alley where the garbage trucks usually ran. But tonight there was no garbage truck. Waiting for me, its engine purring silently in the rain, was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was black, long, and menacing. The paint was so deep it looked like you could fall into it. My driver, a former Special Forces operative named Elias, stood by the rear door holding a black umbrella. He didn't say a word. He just opened the door. "Good evening, sir," Elias said as I slid into the leather interior. The car smelled of cedar and wealth. "To the Skyview Center, Elias," I said, "and take the scenic route. I want to arrive exactly 7 minutes late." The drive through the city was smooth, a glide over the wet pavement. I looked out the window at the skyline I practically owned. I saw the lights of the Meridian Tower where the power was still out in the penthouse. I saw the headquarters of Sterling Tech, a building that was now technically my property. We approached the Skyview Center. The front entrance was a circus. Paparazzi flashes popped like lightning. Limousines were lined up around the block. Red carpet, velvet ropes. The desperate hunger for status was palpable in the air. I saw Preston Sterling standing near the entrance, huddled under an awning. He looked small. He was checking his watch, nervously wiping sweat from his forehead. Vanessa was beside him, looking annoyed, shivering in her silver dress. Jamal was there too, looking lost, holding Vanessa's purse while she berated a valet. They were waiting for the chairman. They were waiting to beg for their lives. "Drive past them," I told Elias. We cruised slowly past the front entrance. The tinted windows of the Phantom hid me completely, but I could see them clearly. Preston stared at the car with a mixture of lust and fear. He knew that car. He knew only one man in the city had a Phantom with those custom rims. "Is that him?" I saw Vanessa mouth to her father. "Is that Blackwood?" Preston nodded, straightening his tie, preparing his fake smile. He took a step forward, ready to open the door for his savior. But the car didn't stop. We rolled right past them, splashing a little bit of puddle water onto Preston's shoes. We turned the corner and headed for the private VIP entrance around the back, the one reserved for heads of state and owners of the building. Preston's face fell. He looked confused. He looked terrified. He realized he wasn't important enough to greet the chairman at the curb. We pulled into the secure underground garage. Security guards snapped to attention. The elevator was waiting, doors open. I stepped out of the car. I adjusted my cuffs. "Let us go up," I said to Elias. The elevator rose swiftly, bypassing the ballroom floor and heading straight for the mezzanine balcony that overlooked the gala. I wanted to see them from above before I descended. The doors opened. I walked to the railing of the balcony. The ballroom was packed. 300 of the city's elite. Champagne flowed. Music played. But there was a tension in the room. Everyone was waiting for the announcement. I looked down. I spotted them immediately. The Sterling family was clustered near the stage, trying to look important but looking increasingly isolated. People were giving Preston a wide berth. The rumors of his financial ruin had spread. He was radioactive. Vanessa was frantically texting on her phone, probably messaging me, the mechanic, to make sure I was still locked up. I pulled out my burner phone. Sure enough, there were 3 texts from her. "Stay put, old man. If you leave that house, I will have you arrested." I smiled. I typed a reply. "I am not in the house, Vanessa." I hit send. I watched her from the balcony. She looked at her phone. She frowned. She typed back furiously. "What do you mean? I locked you in. Where are you?" I looked closer at the screen. I typed one more message. "Look up." I saw her read it. I saw her freeze. She looked around the room confused. Then slowly she tilted her head back. She looked up at the mezzanine. I stepped into the light. I wasn't wearing my grease-stained coveralls. I wasn't holding a wrench. I was standing in a $10,000 tuxedo, holding a glass of scotch, looking down at her, like a god from Olympus. Our eyes met across the distance. Her mouth dropped open. She grabbed Jamal's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. She pointed up at me. Jamal looked up. Preston looked up. For a moment, nobody moved. They couldn't process it. Their brains couldn't reconcile the image of Cyrus the mechanic with the man standing on the VIP balcony. It was a cognitive dissonance so strong it paralyzed them. Preston squinted. He took a step forward, his face pale. He recognized me, but he didn't want to believe it. Then the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, Please welcome the new chairman of Blackwood Holdings and the new owner of Sterling Tech." The spotlight swung up. It hit me. It blinded me for a second, but I didn't blink. Mr. Cyrus Blackwood. The name echoed through the hall. The crowd erupted in applause. But down on the floor, the Sterling family didn't clap. They stood frozen in a circle of silence. Vanessa looked like she was going to be sick. Preston looked like he was having a stroke. Jamal looked like a man waking up from a long coma to find the world had changed. I turned from the railing and walked toward the stairs. The descent was slow. Every step was a drum beat. I wasn't walking down to join the party. I was walking down to deliver a eulogy for their arrogance. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for me. I walked straight toward them. Preston found his voice first. It was a croak, a strangled sound of disbelief. "Cyrus," he whispered. You are Blackwood." I stopped in front of him. I towered over him. "Hello, Preston," I said, my voice smooth and cultured, stripping away the rough accent I had used for years. "I believe you wanted a performance review." Preston's knees actually buckled. He grabbed a waiter's tray to steady himself. But you are a mechanic," Vanessa stammered, her voice shrill and hysterical. "You fix cars. You are poor. You are a fat pig." I looked at her. I looked at the silver dress that cost more than she had in her bank account. "I am a mechanic, Vanessa," I said. "I fix broken things, and I dismantle things that are beyond repair, like your father's company, and your marriage." I turned to Jamal. He was staring at me with tears in his eyes. He didn't look angry. He looked awestruck, and he looked ashamed. "Dad," he whispered. "Hello, son," I said gently. "I told you I would help you pack for Rio, but I think we have some business to discuss first." I gestured to the security guards who were hovering nearby. "Please escort Mr. Sterling and his daughter to the conference room," I said. "We have a board meeting, and bring the eviction notices. I want to save postage." The guards moved in. The crowd watched in stunned silence. I turned and walked toward the conference room, the heavy doors swinging open for me. I didn't look back to see if they were following. I knew they were. They had no choice. I was the chairman, and class was in session. The heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom swung open, releasing a wave of orchestral music and the hum of 1,000 conversations. I stood at the threshold, the cool air of the night still clinging to my skin, contrasting sharply with the stifling, perfumed warmth of the gala. I adjusted the cuffs of my tuxedo. It was a Brioni custom tailored to fit my shoulders perfectly, costing more than the car Vanessa drove. But I knew that to them, to the vultures circling the buffet tables and the social climbers desperate for a glimpse of the new owner, I didn't look like power. I looked like an intruder. I looked like a mechanic playing dress-up. I took a single step onto the plush carpet. The lights from the crystal chandeliers overhead were blinding, reflecting off the diamond jewelry of the city's elite. I scanned the room, my eyes narrowing. It didn't take long to find them. They were huddled near the entrance to the VIP section, a trio of desperation. Preston was sweating through his suit, checking his watch every 10 seconds. Jamal was staring at the floor, looking like a man waiting for a sentencing hearing. And Vanessa. Vanessa was scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk looking for someone rich to impress. Her eyes swept over the crowd, dismissing faces until they landed on me. She froze. Her jaw actually dropped. For a second, I saw genuine confusion. Her brain couldn't process the image. In her mind, I was locked in a dirty house with a padlock on the door. I was supposed to be watching television in my grease-stained coveralls. Then the confusion turned to rage, pure, unadulterated fury. She didn't walk toward me. She marched. Her silver dress swished aggressively around her legs as she closed the distance, her heels clicking on the marble floor like gunshots. She reached me before I could take another step into the room. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that carried enough force to shatter glass. I looked down at her. Up close, I could see the cracks in her foundation. The makeup was applied a little too thickly to hide the stress lines. The eyes were manic. "Hello, Vanessa," I said calmly. I decided to accept the invitation. "Invitation," she shrieked, forgetting to keep her voice down. Several heads turned in our direction. "You were not invited. You are the help. You are the embarrassing relative we keep in the closet. Did you break out? I'm going to have you arrested for destruction of property." She grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into the expensive fabric of my jacket. She tried to shove me backward toward the exit. "Get out," she spat. "Get out right now before anyone sees you. Do you have any idea who is here tonight? The chairman of Blackwood Holdings is coming through those doors any minute. If he sees a dirty, low-class mechanic standing here, he will think we associate with trash. You are ruining everything." I didn't move. I stood like a statue, rooted to the spot. Her shoving was pathetic. It was like a child trying to push over a mountain. "Vanessa," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "take your hand off my suit." She laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Your suit, please. Where did you rent that?" "The costume shop. It probably smells like mothballs and oil." "Security!" She waved her hand frantically at a passing guard. "Security! Over here! There is a vagrant crashing the party." Preston had noticed the commotion. He came running over, his face pale and slick with sweat. When he saw me, his eyes bulged. "Cyrus," he gasped, looking around as if I were a contagious disease. "Are you insane? Have you lost your mind?" "Preston," I said, nodding to him. "You look nervous." "Nervous," Preston spluttered, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "I am about to meet the man who holds my life in his hands. I am about to meet a billionaire, and here you are, the grease monkey, trying to sabotage me." He stepped in close, trying to use his height to intimidate me. It had worked at the wedding. It had worked on the golf course. It didn't work tonight. "Listen to me, you old fool," Preston growled. "This isn't a family barbecue. This is the big leagues. If you don't turn around and walk out that door right now, I will personally call the police commissioner. I will have you thrown in a cell for trespassing. I will ruin you. Do you understand?" I looked at him. I looked at the fear behind his bluster. He was a drowning man trying to order the ocean to stop moving. "I am not leaving Preston," I said. "I have business here." "Business?" Vanessa scoffed. "What business?" "Fixing the valet's car. Unclogging the toilets." "You are a joke, Cyrus. You are a sad, lonely, pathetic joke." I looked past them. I looked at Jamal. He was standing 10 feet away. He hadn't moved. He watched his wife and his father-in-law berate me. He heard them call me trash. He heard them threaten me with jail. And he did nothing. He looked at me, his eyes filled with shame, but he didn't step forward. He didn't say stop. He didn't say that as my father. He just stood there paralyzed by his own weakness, letting them tear me apart because he was too afraid of losing the lifestyle he thought they provided. That was the moment the last thread broke. The final connection between father and son snapped in the silence of my heart. I had given him every chance. I had shown him the truth. And he had still chosen the lie. "Jamal," I said softly. He flinched, but he didn't answer. He looked away, staring at a flower arrangement as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. Fine, I thought. If you want to be a spectator, then watch this. Vanessa grabbed my arm again, pulling harder this time. "Security!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Remove this man. He is drunk. He is harassing us." 2 large security guards in black suits started moving toward us. They looked serious. They looked ready to throw me out on the street. Preston smiled a cruel, satisfied smirk. "Goodbye, Cyrus. Don't come back." The guards were 10 feet away. Vanessa was pulling on my arm. Preston was sneering. Jamal was hiding. And then the music stopped. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. A man walked through the center of the room. It was Marcus, the CEO of Blackwood Holdings. He was a man who terrified Wall Street. He moved with the precision of a shark. He was flanked by his own security detail men who looked like they ate iron for breakfast. Marcus walked straight toward us. Vanessa's eyes lit up. She let go of my arm and smoothed her dress. She elbowed Preston. "Daddy, look," she whispered loudly. "It is the CEO. He is coming to help us. He is coming to kick Cyrus out personally." Preston straightened his tie, putting on his best sycophantic smile. He extended his hand, ready to greet the man he thought was his savior. "Mr. CEO," Preston boomed, "thank you for coming over. We have a bit of a situation here with a local transient, but we were just handling it. So sorry for the disturbance." Marcus didn't even look at Preston. He didn't look at Vanessa. He walked right past Preston's outstretched hand as if it didn't exist. He stepped in front of me. Vanessa stepped forward, trying to block him, trying to insert herself into the narrative. "Excuse me, sir," she said, flashing her teeth. "This man is bothering us. If you could just have your men toss him in the alley, we can get back to business." Marcus stopped. He looked at Vanessa. He looked at her hand, which was reaching out to touch his sleeve. He lifted his hand and brushed her aside. He didn't shove her. He just moved her out of his way with the casual indifference one might use to swat a fly. "Do not touch me," Marcus said, his voice ice cold. Vanessa stumbled back, shocked. Preston's smile faltered. Marcus turned his back on them. He faced me. He stood tall, adjusted his jacket, and then in front of 300 of the most powerful people in the city, in front of the press, in front of my son, he bowed. It wasn't a deep theatrical bow. It was a sharp, respectful inclination of the head, a gesture of absolute deference. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Marcus straightened up and met my eyes. "Good evening, sir," Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly to every corner of the room. "The board is assembled. The shareholders are waiting. We are ready for your address." He stepped to the side, clearing the path. "Welcome, Mr. Chairman." The words hung in the air. Chairman. I saw the color drain from Preston's face. It happened slowly, starting at his forehead and washing down to his chin, leaving him looking like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vanessa made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. She looked from Marcus to me, her eyes wide, her brain misfiring as it tried to rewrite reality. "Chairman," she whispered, "but he is a mechanic." I stepped forward. I didn't look at Marcus. I looked at Vanessa. I adjusted my cuffs, the piston ring cufflinks glinting under the chandelier light. "I was a mechanic, Vanessa," I said, my voice smooth, cultured, and terrifyingly calm. "But tonight I am the man who owns the building you are standing in." I looked at Preston. "And I am the man who owns the debt on your company, Preston. I believe you wanted a meeting." Preston started to shake, visibly shake. His knees knocked together. "Cyrus," he croaked. "Cyrus, wait." I didn't know. It was a joke. The golf course. It was just banter among friends. "We are not friends," I said. "We are business associates. And I am afraid I have some bad news regarding your employment." I turned to Jamal. He was staring at me, his mouth agape. He looked like he had been hit by a truck. "Dad," he breathed. I looked at him for a long moment. I felt the weight of the years, the weight of the sacrifices, the weight of the love I had poured into him. And I felt it all evaporate. I didn't answer him. I didn't acknowledge him. I turned my back on them. "Shall we?" "Marcus," I said. "Lead the way," Sir Marcus replied. I walked past them. I walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for me, a sea of awestruck faces. I left the Sterling family standing in the entrance, frozen in their ruin, small and insignificant in the shadow of the truth. The mechanic had left the building. The chairman had arrived. The silence that followed Marcus's introduction wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on the 300 guests packed into the ballroom. It was the kind of silence that happens when a predator walks into a clearing and every living thing freezes, hoping to be invisible. But Preston Sterling couldn't be invisible. He was standing right in the center of the kill zone, illuminated by the spillover light from the stage. I watched the blood leave his face. It didn't just drain away, it vanished, leaving his skin the color of wet ash. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on me with a terror that transcended business. This wasn't the fear of losing money, this was the primal fear of a man who realizes he has been taunting a lion while standing inside the cage. His mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping for air on a dock, but no words came out. The arrogance that had defined him, the swagger he had worn like a second skin on the golf course, had evaporated instantly. Next to him, Vanessa was trembling. Her hands were shaking so violently that her clutch purse slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. She stared at me, her eyes darting from my face to the tuxedo to Marcus standing respectfully behind me. Her brain was trying to reject the information it was receiving. It was trying to rewrite the narrative back to the one where she was the queen and I was the peasant. "Chairman," she whispered the words stumbling out of her mouth like a broken tooth. But that is impossible. You change tires. You live in a garage. You are nobody." I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her. She was irrelevant now. She was just collateral damage in the war against her father. I stepped onto the stage. The stairs were carpeted in velvet. I walked up them slowly, deliberately, letting the sound of my footsteps be the only rhythm in the room. I walked to the podium. It was made of glass and chrome, sleek and modern. I placed my hands on either side of it. My piston ring cufflinks caught the light flashing silver. I looked out at the crowd. I saw the bankers who had refused Preston loans. I saw the investors he had lied to. I saw the socialites he had tried to impress. They were all looking at me with rapt attention. They sensed blood in the water. Then I looked down at Preston. He was swaying slightly, held up only by the grip of his hand on a chair back. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice was amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system booming through the hall with a resonance that demanded absolute obedience. "Thank you all for coming tonight to mark this transition." I paused. I let the silence stretch again. I know there has been much speculation about the identity of the new majority shareholder of Sterling Tech. I continued, my eyes never leaving Preston's face. There were rumors of foreign investors, rumors of a conglomerate, but the truth is much simpler. The truth is usually standing right in front of you if you bother to look. Preston flinched. I picked up the remote control for the massive LED screen behind me. "Mr. Sterling," I said, addressing him directly. The room gasped. Heads turned toward him. He looked like he wanted to vomit. "I understand you have very specific criteria for the people you associate with," I said, my voice smooth and conversational. "You value aesthetics, you value pedigree, and you have a very strong distaste for what you call the lower class." Preston shook his head weakly. "No. Cyrus, please." "I believe the term you used was fat pig," I said. The crowd murmured. A shockwave of whispers rippled through the room. "Yes," I continued, my voice hardening. "You called me a fat pig. You called me a grease monkey. You told your friends on the golf course that I was barely fit to polish your shoes. You shoved me out of a photograph because I didn't fit your visual brand." I leaned into the microphone. "It is unfortunate, Preston, that this fat pig is the one holding the deed to your headquarters. It is unfortunate that the grease monkey you mocked is the sole owner of 100% of your outstanding shares. And it is tragic, really, that the man you deemed unfit to be in your presence is the man who now owns the chair you sit in." Preston made a sound, a whimper of despair. "But I am a fair man," I said. "I believe in transparency. I believe in letting the numbers speak for themselves. You see, when I acquired your debt, I didn't just buy your company. I bought your secrets." I pressed the button on the remote. The giant screen behind me flared to life. It wasn't a logo. It wasn't a stock chart. It was a spreadsheet. It was the forensic accounting report Marcus had compiled. It was high definition, 10 feet tall, impossible to miss. Rows of numbers appeared. Highlighted in red were the withdrawals. Corporate jet use, personal vacation to Ibiza. $300,000. Gambling debts, Macau casino. $500,000. Shell company construction contracts undelivered. $1.2 million. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised. Photos were being taken. This wasn't just a firing. This was a public execution. I turned to look at the screen, then back at Preston. "You didn't lose this company because of the market, Preston," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "You lost it because you are a thief. You stole from your shareholders. You stole from your employees. You stole from the pension fund to pay for your vanity." "No," Preston shouted, finding a sudden burst of desperate energy. "That is a lie. Those are fabricated. He is lying. He is trying to frame me." I pressed the button again. A new image appeared. It was a copy of a check written from the Sterling Tech operating account to a personal account in the Cayman Islands. It was signed by Preston Sterling. "Is your signature a lie, Preston?" I asked. He stared at the screen. The evidence was irrefutable. It was 10 feet tall. "You embezzled $2 million in the last 18 months alone," I said. "You drained the lifeblood of this company to maintain an illusion of wealth. You drove a Bentley while your engineers were getting pay cuts." I looked at Vanessa. She was staring at the screen, her face a mask of horror. She wasn't horrified by the theft. She was horrified because she knew the money was gone. She realized there was no inheritance. There was no safety net. Her father wasn't a tycoon. He was a criminal. "And that brings us to the business of the evening," I said. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at Preston. "Mr. Sterling, as the chairman of the board, it is my duty to protect the assets of this company. Therefore, effective immediately, you are terminated for cause. Fired." Preston whispered. "You can't fire me. I built this." "You are fired," I repeated, my voice booming. "Security will escort you to your office to retrieve your personal effects. You have 1 hour. Anything left behind becomes the property of Blackwood Holdings." I signaled to the security team. 4 guards moved in on Preston. They didn't treat him gently. They grabbed his arms. "And Preston," I added, "don't plan on leaving the country. My lawyers have already filed a civil suit for the recovery of the $2 million, and I believe the district attorney is drafting a warrant for your arrest as we speak." Preston sagged in the guard's grip. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Cyrus, please," he begged. "We are family. Jamal is my son-in-law." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Family?" I asked. "You threatened to have my son fired yesterday. You threatened to ruin him because I wouldn't sell my home to fund your daughter's greed. You don't know the meaning of the word family. Get him out of my sight." The guards dragged him away. He was sobbing, his feet dragging on the carpet. The crowd parted, watching the fall of a titan with a mixture of horror and fascination. I looked at Vanessa. She was standing alone. Her father was gone. Her husband was standing 10 feet away from her, looking at me with awe. She looked at me. She tried to muster some of her old fire. "You monster," she hissed. "You ruined us." "I didn't ruin you, Vanessa," I said into the microphone. "I just turned on the lights." I turned my gaze to Jamal. He looked small. He looked broken. But he was watching. He was seeing the truth. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black. "The bar is open," I said to the stunned room. "Please enjoy the evening." I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't go to Jamal. I didn't go to Vanessa. I walked toward the VIP exit. Marcus fell into step beside me. "That was effective, sir," Marcus said quietly. "It is not over," I said. I walked out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet. I got into the back of the Phantom. "Where to, Sir?" Elias asked. "Take me to the penthouse," I said. "I have an eviction to supervise." "And Elias, stop at a hardware store on the way." "Why, Sir?" Elias asked. "Because I need to buy some new locks," I said. "And maybe a padlock. I think Vanessa is going to need a reminder of what it feels like to be locked out." The ballroom was a tomb of silence, the kind that rings in your ears after a bomb has gone off. The air smelled of expensive perfume and sudden, catastrophic fear. Preston Sterling, the man who had shoved me at his daughter's wedding, the man who had threatened to ruin my son's career, broke free from the grip of the security guards with a desperate, animalistic surge of energy. He didn't run for the door. He didn't run to his daughter. He threw himself to the floor. He crawled on his hands and knees across the plush carpet, his tuxedo jacket bunching up around his shoulders, his dignity left somewhere back at the buffet table. He reached the edge of the stage where I stood looking down at him. He grabbed the hem of my trousers, his knuckles white, his face wet with tears and sweat. "Cyrus, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking, echoing through the silent hall. "I didn't know. I swear on my life I didn't know it was you. We can work this out. I can be your second in command. I know the company. I know where the bodies are buried. Don't destroy me. I am an old man." I looked down at him. I looked at the hand clutching my leg. It was the same hand that had clamped onto my shoulder at the wedding, pushing me out of the frame. It was the same hand that had held a cigar while he mocked my profession. I stepped back, pulling my leg away from his grasp as if he were something infectious. "You are not an old man, Preston," I said, my voice projecting clearly without the need for a microphone. "You are a criminal, and you are a coward. You offered to show me where the bodies are buried, but I already know. I have the shovel." I looked up at the security guards who were hesitating, unsure if they should touch a man who was weeping on the floor. I said, "Get him out of here," I commanded, my voice sharp as a whip crack. The guards moved instantly. They grabbed Preston by the arms and hauled him to his feet. He went limp, a dead weight, sobbing uncontrollably as they dragged him backward toward the exit. His shoes scraped against the floor, leaving scuff marks on the marble. The crowd watched in horrified fascination, witnessing the literal and metaphorical fall of a titan. As the doors swung shut behind Preston's wailing figure, the room turned its attention back to the stage. Back to me. And back to the only Sterling left standing. Vanessa. She stood alone in the center of the floor. The circle of space around her had grown wider. Her friends, the socialites she had desperately tried to impress, were backing away, distancing themselves from the blast radius. She looked at the closed doors where her father had vanished. Then she looked at me. I saw the gears turning in her head. I saw the panic fighting with the survival instinct. She realized her father was gone. Her safety net was gone. The money was gone. She had one card left to play. One lie she thought was invincible. She didn't run away. She ran toward me. She rushed to the edge of the stage, her silver dress shimmering, tears streaming down her face. But unlike her father, she didn't look defeated. She looked like a martyr. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and pleading, clasping her hands over her stomach in a protective gesture. "Dad," she cried out, using the term she had always spoken with mockery, but now using it as a lifeline. "Dad, please, stop this. You are scaring me. You are scaring the baby." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. The baby. The ultimate trump card. She climbed the first step of the stage, reaching out to me. "I know I said terrible things," she wept, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of Broadway. "I was hormonal. I was scared. But I was just joking. You know that, right? We love you. Jamal loves you. We are going to give you a grandson. A little boy. Your blood. Would you really throw your own family out on the street? Would you really evict a pregnant woman?" She fell to her knees at the top of the stairs, right in front of me. She wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face in the fabric of my suit. "Please, Dad," she muffled into my trousers. "For the baby. For the future of your name. We can be a happy family. I will cook for you. We will live in the big house together. Just forgive us." I looked down at the top of her head. I felt the warmth of her body against my legs. For a second, I remembered the girl I thought she was when Jamal first brought her home. I remembered hoping she would be the daughter I never had. But then I remembered the tequila shots. I remembered the laugh she shared with her ex-boyfriend. I remembered the plan to flee to Rio. I felt a coldness in my chest that was heavier than anger. It was the finality of truth. I didn't try to pull away this time. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out the remote control for the giant screen. "Vanessa," I said softly. She looked up, hope sparking in her tear-filled eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the tears had worked. "Yes, Dad," she whispered. "I am not your father," I said. "And you are not a mother." I pressed the button. The screen behind me exploded into light. It wasn't a spreadsheet this time. It was a video. The audio boomed through the speakers, crisp and clear, cutting through the silence of the ballroom. It was the footage from the Velvet Rope nightclub. The crowd gasped. On the screen, 10 feet tall, sat Vanessa. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was wearing a red dress, throwing back a shot of tequila, laughing with her head thrown back. Sitting across from her was Julian, holding her hand. Vanessa on the floor froze. She stopped breathing. She stared at the screen, her face draining of all color until she looked like a wax doll. The audio played. "The old man is buying it," Vanessa's voice on the screen sneered. "He thinks I am knocked up. He is going to sell his shop. 2 million, Julian. Once the money hits the account, we take it and run." The crowd erupted. It was a sound of pure shock. People covered their mouths. I looked at Vanessa. She was shaking her head, backing away from me on her knees. "No," she whispered. "No, that is fake. That is a deep fake." The video continued. "I will have a miscarriage due to stress caused by his father, and we vanish the on-screen." Vanessa laughed. I pressed the button again. The image changed. Now projected for 300 people to see was the ultrasound image she had sent me. And right next to it, a split screen showing the website prankyourparents.com with the exact same image available for download for $9. I looked down at her. "There is no baby Vanessa," I said, my voice echoing off the walls. "There never was. You invented a life to steal my livelihood. You played on my son's desire to be a father to rob us blind." Vanessa stood up. She looked wild. She looked cornered. "It is a lie," she screamed at the crowd, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "He manipulated it. He hates me because I am beautiful, and he is a mechanic. He is trying to frame me." I pressed the button one last time. The screen changed again. It was the hotel surveillance footage. Vanessa and Julian walking into the hotel room. The kiss. The intimacy. The betrayal. And then the audio from the hotel room. "Jamal is the dumbest guy I have ever met," Julian's voice said. "He isn't just dumb," Vanessa's voice replied. "He is pathetic. He literally cried when I showed him the fake ultrasound." I stopped the video. The freeze frame was Vanessa laughing, holding a glass of champagne, mocking her husband. I turned to Vanessa. "You are not pregnant," I said, my voice low and lethal. "You are not a victim. And effective immediately, you are not my daughter-in-law. My lawyers filed the annulment papers this morning based on fraud. You are nothing to this family." Vanessa looked around the room. She was looking for an ally. She was looking for someone to believe her, but all she saw were faces of disgust. The socialites she worshipped were looking at her like she was something they had stepped in. Then she looked for Jamal. Jamal was standing at the foot of the stage. He hadn't moved since the video started. He was staring up at the screen, his neck craned back, watching the frozen image of his wife laughing at his tears. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His face was slack. His eyes were wide and unblinking. He was seeing the truth in high definition. He was hearing the woman he loved call him pathetic. He was realizing that the nursery he wanted to paint yellow was a tomb for a child that never existed. Jamal Vanessa screamed, running to the edge of the stage. Jamal, don't look at it. It is not true. Your father did this. He hired actors. He is trying to separate us. Jamal slowly lowered his gaze from the screen. He looked at Vanessa. For the first time in his life, he didn't look at her with adoration. He didn't look at her with fear. He looked at her with recognition. He walked up the stairs, slowly, heavily. He stepped onto the stage. Vanessa ran to him. She grabbed his lapels. Baby, listen to me. We can fix this. We can leave. We can go to my mom's. Jamal reached up and took her hands off his jacket. He did it gently but firmly. He held her wrists for a second, looking at her manicured nails, the rings I had helped pay for. Then he dropped her hands. You called me pathetic, Jamal whispered. His voice was cracked, dry as dust. Vanessa froze. I didn't mean it. You said I blubbered. Jamal said, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. You laughed at me because I wanted to be a dad. He stepped back from her. I sold my mother's truck for you, Jamal said, his voice rising, gaining strength. I sold the only thing I had left of her because you said you needed money, and you used it to buy tequila with your ex-boyfriend. Jamal, please, Vanessa begged, reaching for him again. Don't touch me, Jamal shouted. The sound tore from his throat, a raw, wounded cry. Don't you ever touch me again. He turned to me. He looked at me with eyes that were broken but finally open. Dad, he said, I am sorry. I walked over to him. I put my arm around his shoulders. He collapsed into me, burying his face in my shoulder, sobbing like a child. I held him. I held him while the cameras flashed and the crowd watched. I looked over his shoulder at Vanessa. She was standing alone on the stage. She had lost her father. She had lost her husband. She had lost her money. Get out, I said to her. She looked at me. She looked at the crowd. She realized there was no act left to play. The curtain had fallen. She turned and ran. She ran down the stairs, tripping on her silver dress. She ran through the crowd, people parting to let her pass, not out of respect, but to avoid touching her. She ran out the double doors into the rainy night, leaving her purse, her dignity, and her lies behind on the stage. I held my son. It is over, I whispered to him. It is finally over. He nodded against my chest. We stood there for a long time, the new chairman and his son, the mechanic and the man who was finally ready to learn the trade. The war was won. But the rebuilding was just beginning, and this time we would build it on a foundation of truth. The ride back to the Meridian Tower was silent, a funeral procession for a marriage that had been dead on arrival. I drove the Phantom myself, Elias sitting in the passenger seat while Jamal and Vanessa sat in the back. Jamal stared out the window at the rain-streaked glass, a man watching his life dissolve. Vanessa sat rigid, her arms crossed, radiating a heat of pure, unadulterated hatred. She didn't speak in the car. She was saving her venom for the kill. We arrived at the building. I parked the Rolls-Royce right in front of the lobby, blocking the entrance. I didn't care about the ticket. I owned the towing company, too. We took the elevator up to the penthouse. The emergency lights in the hallway cast long, eerie shadows on the walls. When I unlocked the door, the apartment was pitch black. I had cut the power yesterday, and the silence inside was heavy, smelling of stale air and the lingering scent of Vanessa's expensive perfume. I switched on a high-powered flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness like a lighthouse. Vanessa exploded the second the door clicked shut behind us. She didn't just scream, she erupted. She grabbed a vase from the entry table, a piece of blown glass that cost $3,000, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, shards raining down on the hardwood floor. You useless, pathetic little worm, she shrieked, spinning on Jamal. Her face was twisted ugly in the harsh light of the flashlight. This is all your fault. You knew. You knew he had money. You knew your father was a billionaire, and you let me treat him like garbage. You set me up. Jamal stood there, his arms hanging by his sides. He didn't flinch as she picked up a heavy bookend and threw it. It missed him by inches. I didn't know, Jamal said, his voice hollow. I thought he was a mechanic. I thought he was just my dad. You are lying, Vanessa screamed, advancing on him, poking him in the chest with a manicured finger. Nobody hides an empire. You played me. You wanted to humiliate me. You and your fat, disgusting father planned this. You wanted to see me beg. Well, congratulations, I begged. Are you happy now? She swept her arm across the dining table, sending the Hermes box crashing to the floor. The Birkin bag spilled out, looking ridiculous and obscene in the darkness. I stepped forward, moving the flashlight beam to hit her face. She squinted, shielding her eyes. We didn't plan anything, Vanessa, I said, my voice calm and cold. I hid my wealth to teach my son the value of hard work. You are the one who taught him the value of a prenuptial agreement. Vanessa laughed, a high-pitched manic sound that bounced off the walls. Prenup, she scoffed. We don't have a prenup, Cyrus. Jamal was too in love. He was too stupid to ask for one. And you were just the mechanic who paid the bills. You didn't have the leverage to demand one. She turned back to Jamal, a cruel smile forming on her lips. So here is how this is going to go, she said, her voice dropping to a businesslike tone that was even more terrifying than her screaming. I am filing for divorce in the morning. Washington is a community property state. That means I get half of this apartment, half of your savings. And since your father just revealed that he has been commingling funds and supporting our lifestyle, my lawyers are going to argue that I am entitled to a piece of that pie too. I am going to sue you for emotional distress. I am going to sue you for fraud regarding the paternity of the child I was forced to pretend to have. I am going to take everything, Jamal. By the time I am done, you won't even be able to afford the bus fare to leave town. She looked at me, triumph gleaming in her eyes. You thought you won because you have a big title, Cyrus. But the law doesn't care about titles. It cares about assets. And I am going to bleed you dry. I will drag this out in court for years. I will make your name toxic. Jamal looked at me. He looked terrified. He knew she was right. Without a prenup, she could destroy him. She could take the equity I had gifted him. She could turn his life into a legal nightmare. Dad, he whispered. Is that true? Does she get half? I looked at Vanessa. She was smug. She was confident. She thought she had found the loophole. I walked over to the desk in the corner of the room. I opened my briefcase, which I had carried from the gala. I pulled out a single crisp document. Do you remember 3 years ago, Jamal, I asked, keeping the flashlight trained on the paper, just before you bought this place? I asked you to sign a stack of documents. I told you they were for the insurance trust. I told you they were to protect the asset from liability in case someone slipped on the sidewalk. Jamal frowned, thinking back. Yeah, I remember. It was a huge stack. I just signed where you told me to. I turned to Vanessa. You see, Vanessa, I said, I never trusted you. Not from the first day you walked into my shop and wrinkled your nose at the smell of oil. I knew you were hungry, so I protected my investment. I handed the document to her. That isn't an insurance paper, I said. That is a prenuptial agreement. It was buried in the trust formation documents Jamal signed. It states quite clearly that any asset purchased with funds from the Blackwood Trust remains the sole property of the trust. It states that in the event of a dissolution of marriage, the spouse is entitled to nothing if the marriage lasted less than 10 years. Vanessa grabbed the paper. She tried to read it in the dim light, her hands shaking. But I continued, my voice hardening. There is a special clause. Clause 4A, the infidelity clause. It states that if one party is proven to have engaged in extramarital affairs, any claim to alimony, support, or division of assets is immediately voided. I pointed the flashlight at her face. And I have a 4K video of you in a hotel room with your ex-boyfriend confessing to your plan to rob us. I have audio of you admitting the pregnancy was fake. I have evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and adultery. Vanessa dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to the Hermes bag. This won't hold up, she stammered. Jamal didn't know what he was signing. It is coercion. Jamal is the beneficiary, I said. He signed it willingly. And you, Vanessa, you signed the spousal acknowledgement. Do you remember? You were so busy looking at paint samples for the renovation you just scribbled your name on whatever I put in front of you. You were too arrogant to read the fine print. I took a step closer to her. The darkness of the room seemed to wrap around us. "You get nothing, Vanessa. You don't get half the apartment. You don't get alimony. You don't even get the furniture. You are leaving this marriage with exactly what you brought into it, which is absolutely nothing." Vanessa looked at Jamal. She looked for a crack. She looked for the weakness she had exploited for years. "Jamal," she whispered, "are you going to let him do this? I am your wife." Jamal looked at the paper on the floor. He looked at the woman who had called him pathetic. "You aren't my wife," Jamal said, his voice steady for the first time that night. "You are a con artist, and you are fired." Vanessa screamed. It was a primal sound of rage and defeat. She lunged at Jamal, her fingers curled into claws, aiming for his face. I caught her wrist in midair. My grip was iron, the grip of a man who had turned wrenches for 40 years. "That is enough," I said. I twisted her arm, spinning her around and marching her toward the door. "Let me go," she yelled, kicking and struggling. "I need my things, I need my clothes, I need my jewelry." "Your jewelry was bought with stolen money," I said, pushing her into the hallway. "Your clothes were bought with my son's salary. They stay." We reached the front door. The hallway was empty. The emergency lights hummed. I opened the door and shoved her out. She stumbled, falling onto the carpet of the corridor. She looked up at me, her hair messy, her makeup smeared, her silver dress torn at the hem. "My car," she gasped. "I need my car." "The Mercedes." "The Mercedes was leased by the company," I said. "By Sterling Tech. And since I fired your father and froze the company assets, the lease has been terminated. The tow truck took it from the country club 3 hours ago. You don't have a car, Vanessa." She stared at me, realizing the absolute totality of her ruin. "How am I supposed to leave?" she whispered. "I hear the bus runs all night," I said. "Or maybe you can call Julian. I am sure he would love to hear that you are broke and homeless." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $20 bill, the same amount I had left on the bar at the wedding. "Here," I said, dropping the bill onto the floor next to her. "For the fare. Consider it a severance package. You will burn in hell for this, Cyrus," she hissed. I looked down at her. "I have already been through hell, Vanessa. I watched my son suffer because of you. This isn't hell. This is cleaning house." I stepped back and grabbed the handle of the door. "Don't come back," I said. "The locks will be changed by morning. And the doorman has a picture of you. If you set foot in the lobby, you will be arrested for trespassing." I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. I heard her scream on the other side, a long, wailing cry of despair. Then I heard her pounding on the wood. I turned around. Jamal was standing in the middle of the dark living room, illuminated by the beam of my flashlight. He looked exhausted. He looked sad. But he was standing tall. "She is gone," Jamal said. "She is gone," I confirmed. He looked around the apartment. The shattered glass. The spilled bag. The ruins of his fake life. "I don't want to stay here tonight, Dad," he said. "You don't have to," I said. "The truck is downstairs. It is waiting for us." We walked out of the penthouse. We took the service elevator down to the garage. The blue Ford F-150 was parked next to the Rolls-Royce. It looked out of place, but it looked right. Jamal walked up to the truck. He ran his hand along the fender. "I am sorry I sold her," he said softly. "I bought her back," I said. "She is tough. She can handle a few dents, just like us." We got into the truck. I let Jamal drive. He started the engine and the rumble of the V8 filled the garage. We drove out into the rainy Seattle night. We left the Meridian Tower behind. We left the Sterling dynasty in ashes. We drove in silence for a long time, heading away from the city, heading toward the small house behind the auto shop, the place where it all began. As we pulled into the driveway of the shop, the rain stopped. The clouds broke, revealing a sliver of moon. Jamal turned off the engine. He looked at me. "So you are a billionaire," he said, a small smile touching his lips. "I am a mechanic's son," I said, opening the door. "I just happen to own the garage." We walked inside. The shop smelled of oil and grease and hard work. It smelled like freedom. I put the kettle on. We had a lot of work to do tomorrow. We had a company to rebuild and a family to heal. But for tonight, we were safe. And that was enough. The morning news cycle in Seattle was dominated by a single image. It was the face of Preston Sterling, the man who had once looked down on me from the height of his country club membership, now being shoved into the back of a police cruiser. The camera crews had captured the exact moment the handcuffs clicked. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo this time. He was wearing a rumpled tracksuit trying to shield his face with a legal manila envelope looking small and withered. The headlines scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "CEO indicted on 12 counts of embezzlement and securities fraud." I stood in the break room of my auto shop holding a mug of black coffee watching the television mounted in the corner. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the cold satisfaction of gravity doing its work. Preston had spent his life climbing on the backs of others, and he had finally run out of people to step on. My phone rang, vibrating against the metal workbench. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it was. The caller ID said private caller, but the timing was too perfect to be anyone else. I answered, putting the phone on speaker so I could go back to cleaning a carburetor. "You monster," a woman's voice shrieked. It was Clarissa Sterling, Vanessa's mother, the woman who had sneered at my hands at the wedding. "Are you happy now? Are you satisfied?" They took him in front of the neighbors. They put him in a cage like an animal. "Hello, Clarissa," I said calmly, scrubbing a spot of grease off the metal. "I imagine the bail hearing will be set for Monday. I hope you saved some of that money Vanessa embezzled for you. You are going to need a very good lawyer." "How dare you!" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "This is your fault. You bought the debt. You audited the books. You could have buried this. You could have let him retire with dignity. We are family." "We are not family," I said, my voice hardening. "Family doesn't steal from their son-in-law to pay gambling debts. Family doesn't mock the man who paid for the wedding. Preston isn't in jail because of me, Clarissa. He is in jail because he stole $2 million. I just turned on the lights."
"You will rot," she hissed. "I will tell everyone. I will tell the press you are a vindictive, cruel old man. Tell them I said. Tell them I am the man who holds the deed to your house, Clarissa. And tell them that if you call this number again, I will expedite the foreclosure on your property." I didn't wait for her response. I tapped the red icon on the screen and then blocked the number. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain drumming on the metal roof of the garage. The Sterlings were loud when they were winning, but they were even louder when they were losing. They had no grace. They had no spine. They only had noise. I turned off the television. I couldn't watch Preston's perp walk anymore. I had more important things to worry about. I walked up the creaky wooden stairs to the small apartment above the shop. It was where Jamal had slept for the last 3 nights. He hadn't left the room. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't spoken more than 2 words. I knocked gently on the door. "Jamal, I brought you some food." There was no answer. I opened the door slowly. The room was dark, the blinds drawn tight against the gray Seattle daylight. Jamal was sitting on the edge of the twin bed he had used as a teenager. He was staring at the wall, his shoulders hunched, looking like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. I walked over and placed a plate of sandwiches on the nightstand. He didn't look at them. "Son," I said softly, "you have to eat. You can't starve yourself because of them." Jamal looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed with dark circles. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. "I let her talk to you like that," he whispered. His voice was raw, like he had been screaming into a pillow. "At the wedding, at the golf course, in the penthouse. I stood there and I let her call you a pig. I let her slap your hand." "It is over, Jamal," I said, sitting down on the chair opposite him. "We handled it." "It isn't over," he said, tears welling up in his eyes again. "I sold Mom's truck. I sold her truck, Dad, to a stranger. For cash, because Vanessa wanted a facial. How do you forgive that? How do I forgive myself for that?" I leaned forward. "Jamal, look at me." He raised his head, shame written in every line of his face. "I bought the truck back," I said. "It is downstairs in the bay. I have it. It is safe." He shook his head. "That doesn't change what I did. I chose her over you. I chose her over Mom's memory. I was so desperate to be loved by them, to be part of their shiny world, that I forgot who I was. I am weak, Dad. I am just a weak man who let a viper into our home." "You were in love," I said firmly, "and you were manipulated by professionals. Preston and Vanessa have been grifters their whole lives. You didn't stand a chance." "But you saw it," Jamal argued. "You saw through them immediately." "I have 40 years of experience spotting bad parts," I said. "I know when an engine knocks. I know when a frame is bent. You are still learning."
But Jamal, the fact that you are sitting here hurting like this proves you aren't like them. They don't feel guilt. They only feel regret that they got caught. You feel pain because you have a conscience. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Jamal buried his face in his hands. I don't know how to fix this, Dad. I don't know how to look at you without feeling sick. You fix it by getting up, I said, standing. You fix it by coming downstairs and helping me rebuild that transmission on the Mustang. You fix it by working until your hands are too tired to tremble. Work is the only cure for this kind of grief, son. I left the room, leaving the door open. I hoped he would follow. I hoped the smell of the shop, the sanctuary we had built, would draw him out of the darkness. That night the rain turned into a storm. Thunder rattled the windows of the shop. I was downstairs organizing tools when the motion sensors on the perimeter fence triggered a silent alarm. I checked the monitor. Someone was standing at the front gate. I frowned. It was pouring rain. No one should be out there. I walked to the front of the shop and peered through the reinforced glass. Under the harsh glare of the security lights soaking wet stood Vanessa. She looked like a ghost. Her hair was matted to her skull. Her expensive clothes were ruined mud spattered on the hem of her coat. She wasn't wearing the arrogant sneer she wore at the gala. She looked broken. She was shivering violently, clutching the bars of the gate. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch, staying under the awning. I didn't open the gate. I just watched her. Cyrus, she screamed over the wind. Please, open the gate. I have nowhere to go. My father is in jail. The house is seized. I have no money. I am cold. I looked at her. I remembered the way she had looked at me on the golf course. I remembered the slap. I remembered the fake ultrasound. Go home, Vanessa, I said, my voice cutting through the rain. I don't have a home, she wailed, falling to her knees in the mud. Jamal took the apartment. You took everything. Please, Cyrus. I am family. I was your daughter-in-law. I made a mistake. I can fix it. I can be better. Just let me in. Let me talk to Jamal. I know he still loves me. She was doing it again. Even at rock bottom, she was trying to manipulate. She was trying to weaponize Jamal's love. She thought she could cry her way back into the vault. Jamal doesn't want to see you, I said. Let him tell me that, she shrieked. Let him look me in the eye. He is my husband. We can go to counseling. We can start over. I will sign a postnup. I will do anything. Just don't leave me out here. I am scared. I felt a shadow move behind me. I turned. Jamal was standing in the doorway of the shop. He was wearing his old coveralls. He had grease on his face. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. He looked past me at the woman kneeling in the mud. He looked at the woman who had called him pathetic. Vanessa cried out, seeing him. Baby, please, save me. I am sorry. I love you. It was all a mistake. Jamal looked at her for a long moment. He didn't step forward. He didn't flinch. You don't love me, Vanessa. Jamal said, his voice quiet but steady. You love the penthouse. You love the credit card. You love the idea of who I was supposed to be. But you never loved the mechanic's son. I do, she sobbed. I do love you. No, Jamal said. You don't. And I don't love you anymore. I don't even know you. He turned to me. Dad, send her away. He walked back into the shop, picking up a wrench. He didn't look back. He had made his choice. He had chosen dignity. I turned back to Vanessa. She was still kneeling, but her expression had changed. The sorrow was gone, replaced by a flash of that old familiar rage. You brainwashed him, she hissed. You turned him against me. I pressed a button on the wall of the shop. A low mechanical hum filled the air as the side door of the kennel run opened. Two shapes burst out into the rain. King and Duke. My German shepherds. They weren't vicious dogs. They were well trained. But they were big, they were loud, and they knew who belonged and who didn't. They ran toward the gate, barking with deep chest rumbling warnings. They threw themselves against the chain-link fence, their teeth flashing in the security light. Vanessa scrambled backward, slipping in the mud. She scrambled to her feet, eyes wide with terror. Get them away, she screamed. They know a predator when they see one, Vanessa, I said calmly. And they are very protective of this shop. And this family. I stepped closer to the gate. The dogs quieted instantly at my signal, sitting at attention, watching her with unblinking eyes. This is what happens when you push too far, I said. You find out that the people you stepped on have teeth. Vanessa looked at me, then at the dogs, then at the closed door where Jamal had vanished. She realized There was no angle left to play. There was no lie that would open this gate. She turned and ran. She ran down the street, disappearing into the dark, rainy night. She ran toward a future she had built for herself, brick by selfish brick. I watched her go. I felt a profound sense of relief. The storm was passing. The parasite had been excised. I whistled. King and Duke trotted back to me, shaking the rain off their coats. I patted their heads. "Good boys," I said. I walked back inside the shop and locked the door. Jamal was under the hood of the Mustang. He was working. He was healing. I walked over and picked up a rag. "Need a hand with that intake manifold?" I asked. Jamal looked up and smiled. It was a small smile, sad around the edges, but it was real. "Yeah, Dad," he said. "I think I stripped a bolt." "We can fix it," I said, leaning over the fender. "We can fix anything." We worked late into the night, the sound of rain fading into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of tools and the quiet comfort of a father and son rebuilding their world. The Sterlings were gone. The empire remained. And for the first time in a long time, the foundation felt solid. The morning sun filtered through the grime on the high windows of the auto shop, casting long beams of light across the concrete floor. It was 6 a.m, the hour when the city was still wiping the sleep from its eyes, but in my world the day had already begun. I stood by the coffee pot, listening to the familiar gurgle of the brew, watching my son. Jamal was standing in front of the open bay door, staring out at the empty street. He was wearing a pair of blue coveralls that were a size too big for him. They were stiff with starch, unblemished, a stark contrast to my own, which were softened by years of oil and sweat. He looked lost in the fabric, like a child playing dress-up, but his face was that of a man who had walked through a fire. The arrogance was gone. The desperation to please the Sterlings was gone. All that was left was a quiet, raw vulnerability. I poured 2 mugs of black coffee and walked over to him. I handed him one. The heat of the ceramic warmed my hands, a grounding sensation I always cherished. "Drink up," I said. "The first engine is coming in at 7. Jamal took the mug. He looked down at his clean hands, then at mine, which were permanently etched with the dark lines of grease that no amount of soap could fully remove. "Vanessa hated your hands," Jamal whispered, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. "She used to tell me to check your fingernails before we went out to dinner. She said you looked like you had been digging in the dirt." I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness wake up my senses. "Vanessa didn't understand the difference between dirt and work," I said. "She thought money appeared by magic or by marriage. She didn't know that every dollar in her purse started here in the dirt. She didn't know that grease isn't a stain, Jamal. It is a badge of honor. It means you built something. It means you fixed something." I walked over to the 1968 Mustang we had started working on the night before. I picked up a wrench and held it out to him. "You are going to learn," I said. "You are going to learn how to tear an engine down to its bolts and put it back together. You are going to learn how to listen to the machine, how to diagnose the problem not by guessing, but by understanding how the parts move together." "But Dad," Jamal said, looking at the wrench, "you are the chairman. You own skyscrapers. Why are we here? Why aren't we in the boardroom?" "Because the boardroom is where you lose your soul if you don't know where you came from," I said sternly. Preston Sterling lived in the boardroom. He lived in the clouds. And when he fell, he had nothing to catch him because he had never built a foundation. I am not going to let you make that mistake. Before you can run my company, you have to know what it feels like to earn $1 with your back. Jamal took the wrench. He gripped it tightly. He nodded. "Okay," he said. "Teach me." For the next month, we didn't step foot in the glass tower of Blackwood Holdings. We stayed in the shop. I taught Jamal how to change oil, how to replace brake pads, how to rebuild a transmission. I watched him struggle. I watched him bust his knuckles and bleed. I watched him sweat until his coveralls were soaked, and I watched him heal. With every bolt, he tightened a little bit of the Sterling poison left his system. He stopped checking his phone. He stopped worrying about appearances. He started to take pride in the black stains on his hands. He started to stand taller. One afternoon, after we had finished a grueling brake job on a delivery truck, I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at him. "You are ready," I said. "Ready for what?" Jamal asked, wiping grease from his forehead. "To fix the transmission on that Ford." "No," I said. "You are ready for your new job." The next morning, we drove the Phantom to the headquarters of Blackwood Holdings. Jamal was wearing a suit I had bought him. It wasn't a tuxedo. It was a simple off-the-rack gray suit. He looked nervous as we walked into the lobby. The receptionist smiled at me, then looked at Jamal with curiosity. "This is my son," I announced to the room. Jamal straightened his tie, expecting to be ushered into a corner office. He expected a title. He expected a vice presidency. I turned to Marcus, my CFO, who was waiting by the elevators with a clipboard. "Marcus, take him to the basement," I said. Jamal blinked. "The basement?" "Yes," I said. "The mailroom. You are starting today as a junior logistics clerk. You will sort the mail. You will deliver packages to the analysts. You will learn every name in this building from the janitors to the executives. You will learn how this company breathes." "But," Dad, Jamal stammered. "The mailroom." "I started in a garage," I reminded him. "You are starting in the mailroom. You will be paid minimum wage. You will punch a clock. And if you are late, you will be fired. Do you understand?" Jamal looked at me. He looked at Marcus. He took a deep breath. "I understand, sir," he said. "Good," I said. "Get to work." I watched him walk away with Marcus heading toward the service elevators. He didn't complain. He didn't argue. He just went to work. I took the private elevator up to the top floor. I sat in my office looking out over the city. I pulled a file from my drawer. It was the paperwork for the Martha Blackwood Memorial Scholarship Fund. I had liquidated the assets I seized from Preston Sterling. I had sold his Bentley. I had auctioned off his wine collection. I had even sold the office furniture he loved so much. I took every penny of it, along with a significant portion of my own dividends, and I poured it into the fund. It was designed to provide full-ride scholarships for trade schools, mechanics, plumbers, electricians, the people who built the world, the people Vanessa mocked. I signed the final documents, $5 million. It was the best money I had ever spent. I looked at the photo of Martha on my desk. She would have loved this. She would have loved knowing that her name was helping kids who had dirt under their fingernails and dreams in their hearts. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. Subject VS location. I hesitated. I didn't want to know. But curiosity is a powerful force. I opened the message. It was an address for a diner on the outskirts of the city near the airport, a place where truckers stopped for cheap coffee and greasy eggs. I grabbed my coat. I needed to close the book. I needed to see the final page. I drove the truck, not the Phantom. I pulled into the parking lot of the diner. It was raining again, a soft, steady drizzle. I walked inside. The bell above the door jingled. The place smelled of bacon and stale cigarettes. I sat in a booth near the back. I picked up a laminated menu. A waitress walked over. She was wearing a stained pink uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired. She looked aged. She looked like a woman who had been running and had finally hit a wall. It was Vanessa. She didn't look up from her notepad. "What can I get you, hun?" she asked, her voice flat and exhausted. "Coffee black," I said. She froze. The pen stopped moving on the paper. She knew that voice. She looked up slowly. Her eyes widened. She dropped the pen. "Cyrus," she whispered. I looked at her. I looked for the arrogance. I looked for the sneer. It was gone, replaced by a dull, aching misery. She wasn't wearing the Hermes bag. She wasn't wearing the diamond rings. She was wearing a name tag that said Nessa. "You," she stammered. "What are you doing here? Did you come to gloat? Did you come to laugh at me?" I looked around the diner. It was a long way from the Four Seasons. It was a long way from the penthouse. "No," I said. "I came to get a cup of coffee." She stared at me, her hands trembling. "Please, Cyrus," she said, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. I am living in a motel. My dad is in jail. My mom is living in a shelter. I have nothing. Can't you help me? Just a little. Just enough to get a deposit on an apartment. I will pay you back. I swear." I looked at her. I saw the manipulation trying to surface, but it was weak. It was broken. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wallet. Vanessa's eyes locked onto it. She held her breath. I pulled out a $5 bill. I placed it on the table. "For the coffee," I said. Her face crumpled. She realized I wasn't going to save her. I wasn't going to write a check. I wasn't going to be the safety net she had slashed to pieces. "Keep the change," I said. I stood up. I didn't look back. I walked out of the diner, the sound of her sobbing mixing with the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation. I got into my truck. I drove back toward the city. The rain was clearing up. The sun was starting to break through the clouds. I pulled up to the office building. I walked into the lobby. I saw Jamal coming out of the mailroom pushing a cart full of packages. He was sweating. He looked tired. But when he saw me, he smiled. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Hey, son," I replied. "How is the job?" "It is hard," he said. "My feet are killing me, and the mailroom manager is a tyrant." I laughed. "Good. That means you are learning." He parked the cart. "I was thinking," Jamal said, "after work, maybe we could go to the shop." There is a knocking sound in the engine of the truck. I think it might be a loose rod. I want to check it out. I smiled. I put my hand on his shoulder. "That sounds like a plan," I said. We walked out of the building together, the mechanic and the mailroom clerk, the chairman and his son. We had lost a lot. We had lost money. We had lost time. We had lost the illusion of a perfect family. But as we drove toward the shop, the engine of the old Ford humming beneath us, I knew we had found something much more valuable. We had found the truth. We had found respect. And for the first time in a long time, we had found each other. The Sterling era was over. The Blackwood legacy had just begun. And it was built to last. The revolving doors of the Grand Plaza Hotel spun with a heavy, expensive hush. 1 year ago, I had walked through these doors feeling like an intruder in my own life. I had stood in the corner clutching a glass of tap water while the Sterling family treated me like a stain on their perfect carpet. Tonight, the carpet was the same deep crimson and plush, but the man walking on it was entirely different. I stepped out of the back of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The valet did not look at me with pity this time. He practically snapped his heels together, rushing to open the heavy door before my foot could even touch the pavement. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice trembling with respect. "Welcome back." I nodded, adjusting the lapel of my jacket. It was charcoal gray, bespoke cut from Italian wool. It fit me like a second skin. Beside me, Jamal stepped out of the car. He looked different too. The boy who had cowered in the penthouse was gone. In his place stood a man. He was wearing a suit I had not bought for him. He had paid for it himself with the money he earned from his first promotion. He had worked his way out of the mailroom in 6 months. He had learned the logistics of the company from the ground up. His hands were clean tonight, but I knew they were calloused underneath the cuffs. He had earned his stripes. We walked into the lobby. The air still smelled of lilies and old money, just like it had on the night of the wedding. But the scent no longer intimidated me. It smelled like victory. "We are seated in the main dining room, Mr. Blackwood," the maitre d' said, bowing low. "The chef has prepared the tasting menu for you and your son." "Lead the way," I said. We walked through the restaurant. It was crowded with the city's elite. I saw faces I recognized. Bankers who now sought my favor. Politicians who wanted donations. They nodded as we passed, raising their glasses. I acknowledged them with a brief inclination of my head. I was not here for them. I was here for a ritual. We sat at the center table, the best seat in the house. It was directly under the crystal chandelier where Preston Sterling had once shoved me out of the frame. The irony was a spice that made the air taste sweeter. Jamal unfolded his napkin. He looked around the room, his eyes calm. "It feels different being on this side of the table," he said quietly. "It feels different because you paid for your seat," I said. "You belong here now, Jamal. Not because of my name, but because of your work." He smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. I scanned the room. The restaurant was bustling with servers moving like synchronized swimmers, weaving between tables with trays of silver and crystal. And then I saw her. She was coming out of the kitchen doors, struggling with a heavy tray loaded with dirty dishes. Her uniform was a size too big, hanging loosely on a frame that had lost its arrogant posture. The silver dress from the gala was a distant memory, replaced by a polyester black vest and sensible orthopedic shoes that she would have mocked a year ago. Her hair, once a coiffed helmet of blonde ambition, was pulled back in a messy, practical ponytail. It was Vanessa. She looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She moved with the heavy, trudging steps of someone who had been on her feet for 10 hours. She wasn't looking at the guests. She was looking at the floor, trying not to drop the tray. She walked past our table. She didn't see us at first. She was too focused on her burden. But then the light from the chandelier caught the chrome grille of the Phantom parked just outside the floor-to-ceiling window. She looked out. She saw the car. She recognized the custom rims. She recognized the license plate. She stopped. The tray rattled in her hands. Slowly, she turned her head. Her gaze swept the room, searching until it landed on the center table. Her eyes met mine. For a second, the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade. I saw the shock register on her face. I saw the shame. And then I saw the hunger. It was the same hunger she had on the day she married Jamal. The hunger for a life she didn't earn. She looked at Jamal. He was reading the wine list, unaware of her presence. She looked at his suit. She looked at the gold watch on his wrist. She saw the man he had become without her. She took a step toward us. The tray tilted dangerously. "Jamal," she whispered. It was a sound of pure desperation. She took another step, abandoning her station. She was going to make a scene. She was going to try one last manipulation. She was going to fall to her knees and beg right here on the carpet she used to think she owned. But she never made it to the table. A hand clamped down on her shoulder. It wasn't gentle. It was the floor manager, a stern man with a headset and zero tolerance for drama. "Miss Sterling," he hissed, his voice low but audible to me. "What do you think you are doing? You are assigned to Section 4. That is the VIP section. You are not a guest here anymore. You are staff." Vanessa tried to shake him off. Her eyes were locked on Jamal. "But that is my husband," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "That is my father-in-law." The manager tightened his grip. "Mr. Blackwood is a valued patron," he said coldly. "You are a waitress on probation. Do not harass the customers or you will be terminated immediately. Now take those dishes to the scullery." Vanessa looked at the manager. She looked at the threat of unemployment. She looked at the reality of her life. She had no safety net. She had no daddy to call. She had no husband to exploit. She looked back at us one last time. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through her cheap makeup. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to intervene. I looked right at her. I looked at the woman who had called me a pig. I looked at the woman who had tried to erase my wife, and I looked through her. I didn't frown. I didn't smile. I simply let my gaze slide over her as if she were a piece of furniture, a potted plant, a shadow on the wall. I gave her the ultimate punishment. I gave her absolutely nothing. I turned back to Jamal. Vanessa made a small, choked sound, a sob of final defeat. She turned away, her shoulders shaking, and carried her tray of dirty dishes back toward the kitchen. The swinging doors swallowed her whole. She was gone. Jamal looked up from the menu. He had missed the entire exchange. "Did you hear something, Dad?" he asked, looking around. "Just the wind, son," I said. "Just the wind." The sommelier arrived with a bottle of vintage Cabernet. He poured a small amount into my glass for tasting. I swirled it, watching the deep red liquid coat the crystal. "It is excellent," I said. "Pour for my son." The wine filled Jamal's glass. He picked it up, holding it by the stem the way I had taught him. I raised my glass. Jamal raised his. The crystal chimed a clear, pure note that rang out over the restaurant. I looked at my son. I saw the strength in his jaw. I saw the wisdom in his eyes. He had been broken, and he had rebuilt himself. He was no longer the boy who needed me to fight his battles. He was a man who could stand on his own 2 feet. "To you, Jamal," I said, my voice thick with pride. "To the future dad," he replied. "To becoming a man," I finished. We drank. The wine was rich and complex. It tasted of earth and time and hard-won victories. Outside, the rain began to fall on the city of Seattle, washing the streets clean. Inside, we ordered our steaks. We talked about the business. We talked about the scholarship fund. We talked about the cars we were going to restore next. We never spoke the name Sterling again. That name belonged to the past, and we were busy building the future. True wealth is never loud. It does not need to scream its value through designer labels or arrogant boasts. Real power is found in patience, observation, and the quiet dignity of a life built on honest, hard work. Those who judge others solely by their appearance often miss the diamond hidden in the rough. You must be careful who you step on while climbing your imaginary ladder, because the person you humiliate today might be the very one holding the keys to your future tomorrow. Respect is not a transaction. It is the foundation of humanity. When you lose that, no amount of money can save you. If this story of justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more life-changing stories. Let me know in the comments if you would have given Vanessa a second chance. Until next time.